Chapter 1333. Sablefiend Scorpio. Kill that guy in front later. Remember, don't expose the weapons you've used before, lest those hidden powerhouses nearby discover your true identity. Tan Xiao secretly transmitted his voice to her. Understood, replied Sablefiend Scorpio. She glared at the golden immortal in front, and suddenly revealed a bit of killing intent. Just as the two of them were less than 10 meters away from the golden immortal, Sablefiend Scorpio flicked an immortal crystal from her fingers, and released her immortal force to directly bombard the golden immortal's back. Nearly in an instant, the golden immortal's complexion greatly changed, and fear climbed up his face as his body flew out of the bridge. Aoarg! After a shrill scream, the golden immortal was directly bombarded and killed by the terrifying restriction outside the bridge. How much do you know about the Inner Pill sect and the Everlasting Palace, Sablefiend Scorpio? Tan Xiao coldly transmitted his voice. Or the Myriad Sword sect and the 100 Poisons sect? Sablefiend Scorpio's expression shifted and she replied, I know a bit about the Everlasting Palace and the 100 Poisons sect. As for the Inner Pill sect and the Myriad Sword sect, I don't know much about them. I only know some perfected golden immortals from these two sections. That's enough. Tan Xiao nodded and transmitted his voice again. Remember my words. If you encounter the people from the Inner Pill sect, the Everlasting Palace, the Myriad Sword sect, and the 100 Poisons sect in the future, go all out and kill them without exposing your identity. These four sects are our enemies from today onward. Hiss. Despite Sablefiend Scorpio's cold-blooded nature, she couldn't help but gasp upon hearing Tan Xiao's words. Among these four sects, the Inner Pill sect and the Everlasting Palace were top-notch sects in the immortal world, while the Myriad Sword sect and the 100 Poisons sect were second-rate sections. Having so many enemies all of a sudden made Sablefiend Scorpio's heart turn cold. Pressure brings motivation, said Tan Xiao indifferently. Only by stepping on the corpses of our enemies can we live longer, go further, and become stronger. Of course, we don't want to fight them alone. If we encounter enemies from these four sects, they will be our own people. With the situation of these four sects in the immortal world, I'm afraid they have many enemies, right? Yes. As far as I know, their biggest enemy is the Rosefinch Holy Sect and 4 Sacred Palaces. Sablefiend Scorpio transmitted her voice. 4 Saints' Palace? Ever since Tan Xiao returned to the immortal world, he had heard the name of this sect many times. What puzzled him the most was that the 4 holy prefectures seemed to have appeared out of thin air. He had never heard of this name before, but now many experts of this sect had appeared to be enemies with the Inner Pill sect and the Everlasting Palace. If it weren't for the existence of this sect, the Rosefinch Holy Sect would be in a much worse state than it was now. Where did the 4 Saints' mansion come from? Tan Xiao frowned and asked in a low voice as he walked forward. I don't know about its specific origin either, said Sablefiend Scorpio. However, more than 600 years ago, I met people from the 4 Saints' Palace. At that time, they were fighting with the Myriad Sword sect's experts, and the scene was particularly tragic. According to what I saw and heard at that time, I learned that the leader of the 4 Saints' Palace was called Venerable Azure Tiger, a late-stage perfected golden immortal. He should have the bloodline of the ancient divine beast Azure Dragon. He wore an azure Qilin armor and fought against 4 mid-stage perfected golden immortals with ease, forcing them to constantly suffer injuries. Tan Xiao's complexion changed. He knew more about the situation in the distant past, and knew that the Rosefinch Holy Sect was originally a branch of a super sect with several other branches, and the Azure Dragon lineage was one of them. The Azure Dragon, White Tiger, Vermilion Bird, Black Tortoise, and the Qilin clan were the guardian beasts of the original super sect. Tan Xiao and Sablefiend Scorpio continued to move forward while conversing via voice transmission. Sablefiend Scorpio's sneak attack on the Golden Immortal just now attracted the attention of more than a dozen people in front. Therefore, when the two arrived at their area, they all looked vigilant and no longer explored forward. Instead, they stared at the two as though they were facing a great enemy, guarding against any sneak attack. Within tens of thousands of kilometers outside the palace, dozens of perfected golden immortals looked at the footsteps of Tan Xiao and Sablefiend Scorpio in shock. They found that ever since the two stepped on the bridge, it was as though they were walking on flat ground, and didn't encounter any hindrance at all. It was as though the restrictions and traps on the bridge were useless to them. It's strange. Why didn't they encounter any hindrance? Do they know where the restrictions and traps on the periphery of this palace are? I don't get it. I really don't get it. Who the hell are those two? How can they ignore the restrictions and traps outside the palace? They actually walked in front of everyone and came out unscathed. They're very fast. Compared to the others, they're much faster. What's going on? Are they very familiar with this palace? Strange. Amidst their conversation, Tanxiu and Sablefiend Scorpio crossed the long bridge and came to the square in front of the palace. Suddenly, a total of 16 golem beasts around the square left their original positions and rushed toward Tanxiu and Sablefiend Scorpio. Big Dipper transposition. Tanxiu strode forward and reached out to grab Sablefiend Scorpio. The position he stepped on kept changing. Soon, the 16 golem beasts seemed to have lost their target and circled around the square a few times before returning to their original positions. Open. Tanxiu struck a seal, and the 100-meter-tall purple-gold gate slowly opened. Along with the golden light lingering inside, Tanxiu took Sablefiend Scorpio and directly entered the gate. Then the gate slowly closed again. They went in. The dozens of golden immortals and perfected golden immortals on the long bridge, as well as the dozens of perfected golden immortals nearby, all looked incredulous. Some of them had been wandering around here for several days, and even climbed the long bridge to study the restrictions and traps inside. Yet they couldn't enter the palace's door. Yet, those two people went in easily as if they were walking into their own backyard. Wasn't this too inconceivable? Inside the palace, the bejeweled jade palace was picturesque and beautiful. Tanxiu, however, didn't have the time to appreciate the beautiful scenery here. He cast a seal and quickly collected the immortal treasures hanging everywhere inside. Even some precious ores and jewels inlaid on the palace walls were collected into his interspatial ring. He scraped the ground 3 feet high, leaving not even a blade of grass behind. This sentence could completely describe Tanxiu's behavior. He simply didn't want to leave any treasures behind. He crazily took them and stuffed them into his interspatial ring. In just half an hour, Sablefiend Scorpio was shocked to find that the total value of the treasures Tanxiu collected exceeded 100 million crystal essences. 100 million crystal essences. This amount would absolutely cause the eyes of countless perfected golden immortal realm experts to go red with envy. That's too unsightly. Sablefiend Scorpio watched as Tanxiu dug out the golden sandstones on the wall and stuffed them into his interspatial ring. Her mouth couldn't help but twitch a few times and she hesitantly said, "Master, why don't you let me help you? Otherwise, you'll have to collect them for a long time given the size of this palace and the number of immortal treasures. You don't understand the situation here." Tanxiu shook his head and said, "You'll be attacked by the restrictions if you rashly search for immortal treasures. Just stand aside and wait." Sablefiend Scorpio slightly furrowed her brows. She didn't think that Tanxiu was lying. After all, Tanxiu could easily bring her here, indicating that he was very familiar with this place. Just now, she tried to shoot a celestial stone at the fire-taming pearl on one of the pillars. In the end, the celestial stone didn't even hit the pillar. It was shattered by a restriction that was hard to see with the naked eye. Could it be that this master of mine is the successor of Drunken Immortal Supreme? Could it be that he got the inheritance of Drunken Immortal Supreme a few days ago, and can clearly understand the situation in this secret palace? Sablefiend Scorpio's eyes flickered with a pondering look. She looked at Tanxiu's back with a strange expression. In the courtyards, in the halls, Tanxiu's speed was getting faster and faster. A large number of immortal treasures and cultivation resources were continuously collected into his interspatial ring. After 6 days, Tanxiu appeared in the deepest part of the palace and collected all the treasures in the entire palace. Sablefiend Scorpio looked at the empty palace with only the framework left. She couldn't help but wryly smile inwardly. Even if those grand thieves from the Sacred Thief sect came here, they would probably only be able to loot this place, no? With a satisfied expression, Tanxiu looked at Sablefiend Scorpio and smilingly said, "That's enough. These resources are enough for our great Tang Empire to consume for 100 years. Let's leave this place and go to other places to collect immortal treasures and resources. We've entered a treasure mountain, so we must return with a fruitful harvest. Sable-Fiend Scorpio hesitated and asked, Master, you seem to be familiar with this place? I told you that this secret palace is like strolling in my own back garden. Tanshio lightly smiled. It's a pity that I don't care about the inheritance of drunken Immortal Supreme. Otherwise, this entire secret palace would be mine and all the resources would be mine. Sable-Fiend Scorpio's mouth twitched a few times again, but her heart turned fiery. If what her master said was true, then it would be a big profit for her. Shortly after, Tanshio left with Sable-Fiend Scorpio. The moment the duo stepped out of the palace gate, more than a dozen pairs of eyes on the long bridge suddenly focused on them. Tanshio's expression remained unchanged and he said in a clear voice, It's empty inside with no treasures at all. Besides, the restrictions and traps inside are much more powerful than the ones outside. Let me give you a piece of advice. This place is a death trap, so you'd better leave. Did you get a lot of treasures inside, kid? A white-haired old man with a dragon head crutch looked at Tanshio meaningfully and asked, If you really think there are treasures inside, then go ahead and crack the restrictions and traps here, said Tanshio lightly. I just hope you won't regret wasting a lot of time here after entering. Chapter 1334. After saying that, Tanshio no longer paid attention to them, and quickly walked outside with Sable-Fiend Scorpio. Just as they were about to reach the other end of the long bridge, dozens of figures instantly arrived and blocked the two of them at the bridgehead. Hand over your interspatial rings, else today will be the day you two die tragically, shouted a late-stage perfected golden immortal with a chilling glint in his eyes. A faint smile outlined on the corner of Tanshio's mouth as he said, Do you think we'll be afraid of you thieves since we dared to come out from there openly and above board? I'm not afraid to tell you that you can't do anything to us even if your numbers and strength are 100 times stronger. Let me give you a word of advice. Don't provoke us, else you'll end up miserable. The late-stage perfected golden immortal looked disdainful and said, Even supremacy stage powerhouses don't dare to talk nonsense in front of so many of us. You're quite arrogant, kid. Everyone, since these two are acting recklessly, let's clean them up and divide the treasures they got from the palace equally. What do you think? No problem. Agreed. Understood. The dozens of perfected golden immortals nodded one after another, and glared at Tanshio and Sable-Fiend Scorpio. However, even though they agreed verbally, none of them took the initiative to attack Tanshio and Sable-Fiend Scorpio. It was because they were somewhat fearful of Tanshio and Sable-Fiend Scorpio's ability to easily enter the palace. Tanshio and Sable-Fiend Scorpio exchanged glances, and both of them retreated dozens of meters in an instant. Immediately after, Tanshio sneered and said, If you want to fight on the bridge, then we'll be happy to accompany you. Come up and fight if you have the guts. Fight on the bridge. The dozens of perfected golden immortals' complexions changed, and they retreated a few steps. Tanshio and Sable-Fiend Scorpio looked contemptuous at the same time, and immediately sat cross-legged after seeing their fearful expressions. Time passed in this stalemate. A whole day later, when the dozens of perfected golden immortals were staring at Tanshio and Sable-Fiend Scorpio, the white-haired old man's expression suddenly changed. He was keenly aware that the bodies of the two sitting cross-legged on the long bridge were a bit erratic. It didn't seem to be caused by a cultivation technique, but rather, in an instant, a flying knife appeared in his hand, and he instantly threw it at Tanshio. What made him so angry that he almost vomited blood was that the flying knife directly penetrated Tanshio's body. Then, Tanshio's body turned into specks of light and disappeared in front of everyone's eyes. Sable-Fiend Scorpio also opened her eyes at this moment, and shot a strange smile at the dozens of perfected golden immortals before her body collapsed. It's the blood clones. Damn it. We were tricked by those two bastards. The white-haired elder roared furiously. Dozens of others also showed angry expressions and wished they could tear Tanshio and Sable-Fiend Scorpio into pieces. At this moment, millions of kilometers away, Tanshio and Sable-Fiend Scorpio were happily sitting under a big tree. eating the immortal beast meat Tan Xiao had just barbecued. It tastes really good, master. Sable-fiend Scorpio was a carnivore and used to love meat. But ever since she was captured and imprisoned in the convict arena, she rarely ate delicious food. Now that she was eating the delicious food cooked by Tan Xiao, she suddenly had an illusion that it might not be a bad thing to follow this mysterious master forever. Suddenly, she recalled the enemies of the four sects mentioned by Tan Xiao and couldn't help but shudder. She then dispelled the absurd thought from her mind. It smells so good. A figure flickered lightning fast from a distance and came in front of the duo in the blink of an eye. However, the two of them didn't show any signs of wariness. Instead, they smiled at the same time. "You're late." A smile outlined on the corner of Tan Xiao's mouth as he looked at Star Tear's scarred appearance. "I ran into some trouble, but it was more daunting than dangerous." Star Tears forced a smile. "That's right, those two little guys will probably be here soon. We met them on the way and planned to travel together. But who would have thought that we would run into trouble, so I led the enemies away. They should have gone to another place." "What kind of trouble did you run into?" asked Tan Xiao. "We ran into the myriad sword sex people, so we tried to kill them," said Star Tears. Who would have thought that there would be perfected golden immortals from the myriad sword sect nearby? Moreover, there were two of them, so I led the two perfected golden immortals away and separated from them. "How many did you kill?" asked Tan Xiao with a smile. 6 golden immortals. I'm afraid those two perfected golden immortals are having a hard time," answered Star Tears. Tan Xiao gave a thumbs up and praised. "The more I kill, the happier I am. Take a rest first, and then eat something to heal your injuries. We'll team up to hunt for treasures after those two arrive." "That's right, I also want to take you to a place." "Where are we going?" asked Star Tears, confused. "You'll know when we get there." Tan Xiao smiled mysteriously and said, "Eat something first." 2 days later, 2 rather distressed figures appeared in front of the trio. Star Luminous and Star Peng, who were covered in blood and had weak auras, appeared in front of Tan Xiao's group. They directly took out a purple scent pill, and then sat cross-legged on the ground to heal their injuries. Their injuries were comparatively heavy, and it was caused by the pursuit of a golden immortal realm expert on the way here. What made them collapse the most was that they encountered more than one perfected golden immortal along the way, and even their interspatial rings were robbed by some perfected golden immortals. If they had stuffed the purple scent pills directly into their belts instead of putting them in their interspatial rings, they would have been robbed. Hee hee. Looking at their distressed appearance, Tan Xiao sighed a few times. He then took out 2 crystal essences and flicked them to their hands. Then he lightly said, "Heal your injuries while absorbing the immortal force inside the crystal essences to speed up your healing. We still have tens of millions of kilometers to travel, and it's not going to be a smooth journey." "Tens of millions of kilometers?" Star Luminous and Star Peng couldn't help but shiver a few times after hearing this. They directly grabbed the crystal essences and began to absorb the immortal force inside. Then they began to heal their injuries and replenish their consumed immortal force. Half a day later, just as Tan Xiao finished cooking the immortal beast meat, he suddenly patted his forehead and was at a loss whether he had to cry or laugh. "I'm so confused. Just let them heal their injuries and directly enter the heavenly abode artifact. Why are they foolishly waiting here? You too, hurry up and enter the heavenly abode artifact." "Understood." After Star Luminous and Star Peng entered the heavenly abode artifact, Sable-fiend Scorpio was also arranged by Tan Xiao to enter the artifact. He and Star Tears each took a roasted immortal beast's thigh and ate it while hurrying on their way. "Anti-Star Tears, did those 2 little guys discover your true identity?" Tan Xiao asked with a smile while vigilantly observing the surroundings. "No, they won't be able to discover my identity, given their strength." Star Tears shook her head and smiled. "That's unless I take the initiative to expose myself." Tan Xiao said, "Don't use your divine abilities for the time being when they follow you. I have some divine abilities and secret arts here, so you can take them to comprehend them. We're in the secret palace and there are too many enemies coming, so our mission is to hunt for treasures and kill the enemies." Star Tears took several ancient books of divine abilities and secret arts handed over by Tan Xiao and put them into her interspatial ring. Then she said with all seriousness, the number of powerhouses from the Inner Pill sect, Everlasting Palace, Myriad Sword sect, and 100 Poisons sect entering the secret palace this time is not small. So it's better for us to be cautious. I still remember you saying that there's no need to worry about firewood as long as the Green Hills last. We can kill people, but we must avoid them immediately if we encounter too many enemies. Don't worry, Anti-Star Tears. Tan Xiao nodded. I know what I'm doing. Half a year later. Tan Xiao and Star Tears hurried on their way, picking up treasures and killing people at the same time. In the past 6 months, they had killed 16 Golden Immortals and 1 perfected Golden Immortal from the Inner Pill sect, 37 Golden Immortals, and 2 perfected Golden Immortals from the Everlasting Palace, 8 Golden Immortals, and 1 perfected Golden Immortal from the Myriad Sword sect, and 6 Golden Immortals from the 100 Poisons sect. The Sea of Stars is ahead. Tan Xiao took a deep breath and whispered according to the memory in his mind. At this moment, he and Star Tears were at the edge of the mountain range. They could already see the turbulent sea surface and the flying immortal beasts above it. Is there any danger here? Asked Star Tears. There's definitely danger here. Tan Xiao shook his head. It's just that it's not from the restrictions and small arrays in the secret palace. It's from the other immortals. We're now only tens of thousands of kilometers away from our destination. We can land on that island as long as we enter the sea. The inheritance of Drunken Immortal Supreme is on that island. Drunken Immortal Supreme already told you that you can't accept the inheritance, yet we still came here. Isn't that bad? Asked Star Tears with a forced smile. There's nothing bad about it. Tan Xiao shook his head. He just knows my identity, so he doesn't want me to receive his inheritance, but he didn't say anything about others. Since I already know the array used to construct this secret palace and know what's inside, I can naturally bring others here. He didn't say that I'm not allowed to bring others here to accept his inheritance. You want me to accept the inheritance of Drunken Immortal Supreme? Asked Star Tears in surprise. That's right. I do want you to accept the inheritance of Drunken Immortal Supreme. Tan Xiao nodded. I dare say that you'll soon be able to break through to the supremacy stage after receiving the inheritance, Anti-Star Tears. The moment you break through to the supremacy stage will be the time for you to return to the Rosefinch Holy Sect ahead of time. Didn't you say that you don't want me to return to the Rosefinch Holy Sect ahead of time? Asked Star Tears, confused. I don't want you to return to the Rosefinch Holy Sect before you have enough strength, said Tan Xiao. But it won't be a problem if you can break through to the supremacy stage. Besides, I hope you can bring back the news that I'm still alive and tell my father. Star Tears pondered for a moment before she firmly nodded and said, Don't worry. I'll only tell him. I'll also tell him about your intentions and some plans. Chapter 1335. The tens of thousands of kilometers of sea area looked calm and tranquil, without even the shadow of a ghost to be seen. However, Tan Xiao and Star Tears were very cautious and didn't rush to leave the edge of the mountain forest. Instead, they restrained their auras and conversed in a low voice while watching the sea. Soon after, 4 figures appeared on the coastline. One of them was a stooped old man with a walking stick. He exuded a thick aura of lethargy and was obviously close to the end of his lifespan. Among the 3 people beside the old man, there was an old woman with a head full of silver hair, and 2 young men. Dala. Tan Xiao and Star Tears exchanged glances with each other and looked surprised. They both knew the old man and were well aware of his identity. Dala was the Grand Elder of the Tua Tua sect, and was more than 16,000 years old, even older than Star Tears. More than 8,000 years ago, Dala had broken through to the perfected Golden Immortal stage, yet he had yet to step into the supremacy stage for the next 8,000 years. Dala's lifespan is coming to an end, said Star Tears in a low voice. The opening of the secret palace of Drunken Immortal Supreme's inheritance might be his last chance. His lifespan will double if he can get a chance to help him break through here. But if he can't, it won't be long before he passes away and enters the 6 paths of reincarnation to start a new journey in life. Tan Xiao nodded and said, Dying is like an extinguished lamp. He'll be reincarnated again with a new identity and memories. It's like saying goodbye to the past. Unless a supreme powerhouse takes action and sacrifices a millennium of his own cultivation to help him enter the lower level of the 6 paths of reincarnation in the pocket world, only then can he preserve some of his memories. There are very few supreme powerhouses in the immortal world nowadays, sighed Star Tears. Each and every one of them is trying their best to transcend the tribulation and become a god. Who would be willing to sacrifice a millennium of cultivation to help him? Where are they? Star Tears and Tanshio watched as Dala's group of 4 flew forward and disappeared into thin air as they flew over the sea. A glint flashed in Tanshio's eyes, and he stared at the sea for a quarter of an hour before he suddenly said, I know a lot about the secret palace, but I haven't carefully studied the situation here since it's my first time here. It seemed that entering the sea was equivalent to entering a brand new array. Let's go in as well. Perhaps we'll be able to see a different scene after we enter. All right. Star Tears nodded slowly. When the 2 of them appeared on the coastline, Tanshio's divine sense spread forward. In the blink of an eye, he reached out and grabbed Star Tears' arm. Then he quickly passed through a layer of energy barrier. It was as if another world had appeared out of thin air before their eyes. The surface of the sea was still calm, but countless bolts of lightning would strike down from the sky from time to time. Every time a bolt of lightning struck, it would cause ripples on the surface of the sea. However, above the sea, a total of 9 bridges that were 100 meters wide extended into the deep sea. The bridges were in the shape of stairs, extending forward and upward. Even with the eyesight of Tanshio and Star Tears, they couldn't see the end of the bridges. It was as if the 9 bridges had extended into the distant sky. Thousands of golden immortals and perfected golden immortals stood at one end of the bridge, watching the backs of the 900 golden immortals and perfected golden immortals on the long bridge as they walked forward step by step with difficulty. A domain bridge. Upon seeing the scene, Tanshio secretly sighed inwardly. He was able to figure out the situation here through the contents of the entire array space he had obtained. He knew that this was a test, and also the second test to obtain the inheritance. If he could pass this domain bridge, he would have the opportunity to enter the floating island and arrive at the drunken immortal palace. Let's go. Tanshio touched Star Tears' arm, and then came to Dala's side without anyone noticing. Although he noticed that the 3 people around Dala looked vigilant, he didn't care about it. Instead, he deliberately put on a curious look and asked with a smile, What's the situation here, Senior? We came here inexplicably, so why is everyone gathered here? And why are there people walking slowly on the bridge? Can't they just fly away? Dala turned his head and looked at Tanshio in surprise. He didn't rebuke Tanshio given his mild temperament, and instead explained with a smile. This is the potential space. There are a total of 90,000 path guides in the entire secret palace, and anyone who gets one can find this place. The end of this long bridge is where the drunken immortal palace is located. Only by passing the potential spaces test can one reach the drunken immortal palace and obtain the inheritance of drunken immortal supreme. The inheritance of drunken immortal supreme is here? Tanshio was surprised. What about the other places? The other places are naturally the first test left by drunken immortal supreme. Only by surviving the other places and finding the path guide can you come here, said Dala with a smile. However, little friend sure has good luck. You didn't find a path guide and somehow came here. Maybe you can get a big opportunity here, little friend. You must be joking, Senior, replied Tanshio modestly. I just came here to join in the fun and find some treasures to make a small fortune. I'm not looking forward to the inheritance of drunken immortal supreme. Dala was surprised. He had lived for a long time and could naturally distinguish the falsehood of others. This young man in front of him definitely didn't care and didn't look forward to it from the bottom of his heart, which was something he didn't expect. After carefully looking at Tanshio a few times, he asked, How should I address you, little friend? Great Tang Heavenly Emperor, answered Tanshio with a smile. Dala didn't know whether to laugh or cry as he looked at Tanshio. He had a good impression of this young man. It was really interesting for him to dare to address himself as Heavenly Emperor at such a young age. He couldn't judge Tanshio's cultivation, but his guess was wrong. This young man in front of him was probably a golden immortal at most. However, his purpose of coming here this time was to obtain an opportunity from drunken Immortal Supreme before the end of his lifespan. Therefore, even though he was a bit curious about Tan Xiao, his eyes still shifted to the long bridge and fell on the 900 immortals who were working hard to climb the bridge. Master, the Golden Wing sect has produced an amazing peerless genius. He's able to firmly occupy the first position among the 900 golden immortals and perfected golden immortals, and even left the second person behind by nearly 100 meters. He should be ranked in the top 3 among the third batch, right? The burly middle-aged man next to Dala couldn't help but sigh. Indeed. Dala nodded and said, with his aptitude, it's likely that breaking through to the perfected golden immortal stage will be a piece of cake if he doesn't fall in a short period of time. As for whether he can break through to the supremacy stage or not, it's hard to say. However, the second person, Canopy True Monarch, is also quite good. Although he's not as dazzling as the peerless genius of the Golden Wing sect, he's still a very powerful figure among the perfected golden immortals. As far as I know, he just broke through to the perfected golden immortal stage less than a millennium ago, no? Yeah, more than 800 years. The burly man nodded and said, there are 120 perfected golden immortals among the 900 golden immortals and perfected golden immortals, but Canopy True Monarch is indeed the strongest among them. It's just that he doesn't want to pledge allegiance to any sect and relies entirely on himself to constantly explore and work hard. It's very difficult to have a smooth journey on the path of immortal cultivation. If I didn't have any background and completely relied on my own hard work, I might have broken through to the supremacy stage by now. Dala forced a wry smile. Tan Xiao, who stood beside the two men and listened to their conversation, felt a bit of admiration for Dala. He knew that Dala was right. Having a smooth journey on the path of immortal cultivation was not only not beneficial to oneself, but also greatly disadvantageous. The path to immortality was arduous. Only by going through hardships and comprehending the heavenly Tao could one carve a bloody path and rush to the supreme supremacy stage. For example, his predecessor was once the young master of the Rosefinch Holy Sect. He was absolutely favored by all and had a smooth-sailing life and didn't know the immensity of the heavens and earth. In the end, he encountered a little bit of danger and ended up dying. From then on, his body was occupied by him. Later, he gave up the protection of the Rosefinch Holy Sect and traveled everywhere in the immortal world like an ascetic cultivator. He fought again and grasped a slim chance of survival from desperate situations. Only then did he soar and finally become a powerhouse in the supremacy stage. Tan Xiao secretly took a deep breath and quickly took out a jade slip. He engraved a pill refining formula into it, and then secretly stuffed it into Dala's hands. Huh. Dala gently turned his head and looked at Tan Xiao with a bit of surprise on his old face. He found that Tan Xiao didn't look at him, but was paying attention to the 900 immortals on the long bridge. Immediately, a wisp of his divine sense entered the jade slip. Dala's body trembled, and his eyes burst out rays of light. When he quickly put the jade slip into the interspatial ring, he sent a voice transmission to Tan Xiao. Thank you, fellow immortal. Tan Xiao replied. Since it's fate that we meet, there's no need to thank me. Dala took a deep look at Tan Xiao. When his eyes shifted back to the immortals on the long bridge, the shock in his heart still hadn't calmed down. The Supreme Pill Formula. If a late-stage perfected golden immortal can take a Supreme Pill, the chances of breaking through will increase by 30%. Everyone knows what this 30% increase in probability means. Originally, I only had 30% confidence, and it's precisely because of this that I see the supremacy stage has always been far away. But with the Supreme Pill Formula, I can refine the Supreme Pill and increase my chances of breaking through to the supremacy stage to 60%. 60% is my limit and also the dawn of a breakthrough. Even if I can't get the inheritance of drunken immortal supreme in the secret palace, I still have a chance. This favor is too heavy. Who is he? Dala wanted to ask about the other party's identity, but he could see that the other party didn't intend to tell him. In desperation, he could only keep this kindness in mind and wait for the other party to use him in the future to repay this friendship. What's wrong, master? The burly man noticed Dala's strange expression and immediately asked, "It's nothing." Dala shook his head. Chapter 1336. In the following 2 days, Tan Xiao and Star Tears quietly observed the 900 people on the Long Bridge and thoroughly understood the situation here. The spatial pressure on the Long Bridge formed a unique pressure according to the different cultivation realms of the Immortals. For example, the spatial pressure suffered by Golden Immortals was much smaller, while the spatial pressure suffered by perfected Golden Immortals was greater. The magical spatial pressure was different according to the different realms of each person. In the end, be it Golden Immortals or perfected Golden Immortals, they were all in the same pressure environment. "I can't accept this." A Golden Immortal suddenly spurted out a mouthful of blood, and his body flew backward like a kite with a broken string. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, he crashed into the ground in front of them. The first Immortal who was forced to come down from the third batch of bridge climbers has appeared. "I'm afraid he'll be forced back again and again in the following days." A sage-like perfected Golden Immortal couldn't help but sigh. The eyes of the perfected Golden Immortal who was forced back flickered with humiliation. After climbing up from the bridge deck, he resisted the scornful eyes of the crowd and quickly left. Half a quarter of an hour later, another Golden Immortal was sent flying backward while spurting out blood, and crashed heavily in front of the crowd. Then, just as the sage-like perfected Golden Immortal said, the Golden Immortals and perfected Golden Immortals were suppressed by the spatial gravity on the Long Bridge, and eventually flew backward. In the next 4 days, only 7 of the 900 Immortals who climbed the bridge were still holding on. The most dazzling peerless genius of the Golden Wing sect was still climbing with difficulty, but every time he climbed a step, it would take him several hours. Anyone with a discerning eye could see that he had reached his limit, and could be forced back at any time. Sure enough, another 4 hours later, the peerless genius of the Golden Wing sect was forced to fly back and heavily crashed in front of the crowd. However, none of the thousands of Immortals watching showed a look of contempt. On the contrary, they looked at the peerless genius of the Golden Wing sect with a little regret and admiration in their eyes. There are 9,999 steps on the Long Bridge. It's already very heaven-defying for him to reach the 7,320th step. The second person had only walked 6,900 steps before he was forced to retreat. Also, among the 1,800 Immortals in the first 2 batches, the most powerful one seems to have only climbed 7,250 steps, right? A perfected Golden Immortal 100 meters away from Tan Xiao shook his head and sighed with a wry smile. His words. Everyone nodded in agreement. Time flew by. On the 10th day of Tan Xiao's arrival, all 900 Immortals were forced back by the spatial pressure. The most powerful Immortal in the third batch was the peerless genius from Golden Wing sect. He was also the most talented Immortal among the 2,700 Immortals from the first 3 batches. "Let's get ready." Dala took a deep breath and instructed the 3 people around him. Tan Xiao didn't know the rules of the bridge, so he immediately asked, "Senior, the first 900 have all retreated. Will the 4th batch of 900 Immortals climb the bridge together?" "That's right." Dala nodded and said, "Each batch of 900 people will be sent for 18 days. If they don't reach the other end within 18 days and are not forced out by the pressure on the bridge, they'll be directly killed. Therefore, those who can't cross the bridge within 18 days can only withdraw." Tan Xiao suddenly understood and asked, "Senior, are you planning to climb the bridge in the 4th batch?" Dala's expression was a bit solemn as he sighed and said, "This old man's lifespan is coming to an end, so I can't waste any immortal fate. If I can get the inheritance of Drunken Immortal Supreme, my chances of breaking through to the supremacy stage will be greatly increased. Fellow Immortal, you can also follow us to climb the bridge." Tan Xiao pondered for a moment before shaking his head and said, "I'll pass. There are many powerhouses waiting here now, so I'm afraid it'll be difficult to get a spot in the 4th batch. Let's wait for the 5th or 6th batch and then try again." "Great Tang Immortal friend, you must think about it clearly," said Dala. "If someone passes this test 1 step ahead, they can enter the Drunken Immortal Palace faster. The path to immortality is long, and we need to fight for it ourselves every time." Tan Xiao nodded and said, I understand what you said, but I don't want to try it now. It might be good for me to watch it more. Fine. Dala saw that Tan Xiu continued to insist and no longer tried to persuade him. 3 hours later, silhouettes dashed toward the front of the bridge like bolts of lightning. As the immortals stepped onto the first flight of stairs 100 meters ahead, their bodies began to sway. Many of them were no longer in a hurry to move forward after setting foot on the first flight of stairs. Instead, they steadied themselves and adapted to the spatial pressure above, before moving forward slowly. Tan Xiu's eyes wandered on the 900 people, and finally landed on Dala's back. Although he didn't feel anything, Tan Xiu could still perceive through his observation that the spatial pressure Dala was currently enduring must be very great, since he was very cautious with every step he took. Time flew by. In the blink of an eye, it was the 9th day. When the first person couldn't withstand the spatial pressure on the bridge, and was forced to fly upside down, the people behind him were forced to retreat one after another. There are 650 more to go. Star Luminous, who had been called out from the heavenly abode artifact by Tan Xiu, spoke in a low voice with a glint in his eyes. Star Pung followed closely behind and said, "There will be a steady stream of people being forced to retreat at this time. However, that Black Zephyr Old Freak's potential is really great. He has already climbed the 7,500th stair, and seems to have yet to reach his limit. Maybe he can challenge the 8,000th stair." He can indeed reach the 8,000th stair, and he may even pass the 9,000th stair, said Tan Xiu calmly. Pay attention to his footsteps. Although each step he takes is very slow, it's very stable. Suddenly, Tan Xiu slightly furrowed his brows. He watched Dala spurt out a mouthful of blood, and was sent flying backward. He immediately forced a smile inwardly. Dala hadn't been able to break through to the supremacy stage for more than 16,000 years, yet he could persist to the 6,320th stair, which was already very rare. Are you all right? Tan Xiu took a step forward to help him up and asked. I thought I could get an immortal fate here, said Dala with a bitter smile. But I didn't expect that I still couldn't pass the test. This test left by Drunken Immortal Supreme is really abnormal. If it's not abnormal, how could he choose a successor with good aptitude? Tan Xiu lightly smiled. According to the current trend, only a handful of people can pass this test in the end. That's right. Dala nodded and sighed. I'm afraid no one has been able to cross this long bridge to reach the outside of the Drunken Immortal Palace. If that Black Zephyr Old Freak's potential can be fully forced out, maybe he can pass the long bridge, said Tan Xiu with a faint smile. Dala was surprised. After a while he silently nodded and said, Black Zephyr Old Freak? His cultivation speed is indeed very fast. He's only 5,000 years old now, right? But he has already cultivated to the perfected golden immortal stage. With this cultivation speed, he may be able to break through to the supremacy stage within 10,000 years. Sure enough, 12 days after the fourth batch went up, Black Zephyr Old Freak had already reached the 9,000th step. However, his originally steady footsteps had been staggering several times, as if he could be blasted back at any time. He was the only one left on the long bridge. Dala looked regretful. He shook his head and sighed. His aptitude is indeed very strong. Unfortunately, this long bridge test is really abnormal. I'm afraid he won't be able to pass it. Not necessarily. Tan Xiu's eyes were fixated on Black Zephyr Old Freak's back, because he found a slight abnormality at the corner of his back. In a flash, Tan Xiu sent him a voice transmission. You can't cross this long bridge with your current strength. You must try to break through. If you can break through to the mid-level of perfected golden immortal when your potential is stimulated, the following steps won't be difficult for you. On the steps. Black Zephyr Old Freak's expression changed slightly. He didn't expect that someone would send him a voice transmission at this moment. As he slowly turned back, his eyes swept across the faces of thousands of people. He was keenly aware that Tan Xiu nodded at him. Suddenly, his eyes flashed and he turned back with difficulty. Things have come to this. I'll give it a try. If what he said is true, then my chances of obtaining the inheritance will be much higher. Black Zephyr Old Freak took a deep breath and immediately began to circulate his immortal force according to his cultivation technique, frantically trying to break through. For 2 whole days, he didn't take even half a step forward. Just when many people were a little impatient, Black Zephyr's body suddenly shook. As a huge aura erupted from his body, he suddenly felt that the impact of the spatial pressure on him was greatly reduced. I succeeded? Black Zephyr Old Freak's eyes burst with ecstasy. With an excited roar, he turned around and cupped his fists in the direction of Tan Xiao. He sent a voice transmission to Tan Xiao's ear. Thank you. Tang Xiao let out a faint smile and shook his head without replying. Subsequently, Black Zephyr Old Freak continued to move forward. This time, his speed was much faster than before. Every half an hour, he could step on a step. Even at the end, his usage time didn't increase by much. Heavens! He actually broke through to the mid-level perfected Golden Immortal on the Long Bridge. Looking at his speed, could it be that the spatial pressure caused by breaking through to the mid-level perfected Golden Immortal is still the same as before? How is this possible? Could it be that because of his cultivation breakthrough, he can move forward more easily? What a freak! He's only 5,000 years old, but he actually broke through to the mid-level perfected Golden Immortal so easily. If I remember correctly, in the entire history of the immortal world, there aren't many experts who broke through to the perfected Golden Immortal realm at the age of 5,000, right? I'm afraid this Long Bridge test won't be difficult for him. I'm really envious of him. Returning from the immortal world at the end of the month, in order to thank the brothers and sisters for their unwavering support for Jingyi for 2 years, Jingyi decided to distribute Alipay red envelope passwords on the WeChat public account at the end of the month. Brothers and sisters, please keep an eye on the WeChat subscription account for the latest news. Jingyi's WeChat public account is JYGS00, or you can directly search for Jingyi in the WeChat subscription account. Chapter 1337. Dala listened to the discussions of the immortals around him, and turned to look at Tan Xiao. His expression was a bit strange as he asked via voice transmission. Did fellow immortal just send a voice transmission to Black Zephyr? Are you giving him pointers? That's right, replied Tan Xiao via voice transmission. But he was able to break through under tremendous pressure, indicating that his potential hasn't been fully stimulated before. You're amazing, fellow immortal. It seems that Black Zephyr owes you too much. Dala forced a smile. Black Zephyr doesn't belong to any force. He's been exploring his own path of cultivation, and has encountered enough trials and tribulations. That's why he can be so dazzling. Tan Xiao smiled. I think we can give such people some chances. Dala stared deeply at Tan Xiao and asked, What's your origin, fellow immortal? This old man owes you a huge favor, but I'll have to find someone to repay it in the future. Tang Xiao gave it a thought and suddenly revealed a smile. Then he transmitted his voice and said, If Senior really wants to repay this favor, you might as well help the Vermilion Bird Holy Sect when you break through to the supremacy stage. The immortal world hasn't been peaceful recently, and I can't stand the behavior of some people. Just give this benefit to the Rosefinch Holy Sect. Dala narrowed his eyes and slowly nodded after a long while. Rest assured, fellow immortal. On the 17th day after the 4th batch of 900 immortals set foot on the Long Bridge, Black Zephyr finally stepped on the 9,999th step. He was just 1 step away from passing the Long Bridge test. Don't go up. At this moment, more than 90% of the immortals were praying inwardly, because once Black Zephyr passed this test, they would have one more competitor if they could pass it in the future. Unfortunately, Black Zephyr let them down. As he firmly took the last step, the huge spatial pressure suddenly disappeared out of thin air. Immediately after, he turned around and looked deeply at Tan Xiao again, sending a voice transmission. Black Zephyr will always keep this favor in mind. If fellow immortal has any request in the future, Black Zephyr will definitely fulfill it. Having said that, he turned around and rushed toward the gate of the Drunken Immortal Palace on the opposite side of the square. Dala was not in a hurry to leave. He was now deeply curious about Tan Xiao, so he wanted to see how far Tan Xiao could go after stepping on the Long Bridge. Are you going? Dala asked. Tan Xiao pondered for a moment and looked at the 4 people around him. Finally, he nodded silently and said, Since 4 batches have gone up, let's go up in the 5th batch. Remember, Only when you break through under great pressure will it be easier. Star Tears and the other three nodded. There was one thing that Tan Xiao did not tell them. With his ability, he could easily send the four of them to the other end of the long bridge, allowing them to avoid this test. However, Tan Xiao did not plan to do so, because this kind of trial was not bad. Instead, it was beneficial to their cultivation. 6 hours later, numerous lightning-fast silhouettes sprinted to the first step of the bridge. Almost in an instant, everyone's footsteps stepped on the first step. Tang Xiao didn't use the array in the secret palace's space. He also wanted to see his potential, and wanted to give himself a trial by fire opportunity. If he really couldn't hold on, he would use some means to cross the long bridge. He would even help the other four if they could pass the threshold of the 8,000th step. Follow me closely, Anti-Star Tears. Tan Xiao transmitted his voice to her, and then walked forward step by step, withstanding the spatial pressure. Half a day later, when Tang Xiao's pace came to a halt, and he turned around to look behind him, he suddenly froze and a strange expression appeared on his face. He found that not only was he far ahead of the first person, but he was also hundreds of steps behind the second person. It's not that difficult, is it? Tang Xiao furrowed his brows with a puzzled expression on his face. After hesitating for a while, he decided to wait at the 6,000th step. After a day and a half, Tan Xiao climbed to the 6,000th step. He didn't know that the thousands of immortals who had or hadn't taken the trial had been shocked by his terrifying posture. Is he still human? It only took him a day and a half to reach the 6,000th step? Is this long bridge his back garden? Where did this guy come from? His speed is too fast. Isn't he afraid that he'll use up all his strength and greatly reduce the time he can hold on later? What's his cultivation level? I don't think the spatial pressure has any effect on him. What the hell is going on? It's too terrifying. This guy is really heaven-defying. I've never seen him before. Where did he come from? A peerless genius. Dala's old face was already filled with shock. Even the burly man beside him had his mouth wide open. He didn't expect that the kid who struck up a conversation with his master would be so terrifying. After a long time, seeing that Tan Xiao didn't continue his journey, he gulped down and sighed. That great Tang Heavenly Emperor is really terrifying, Master. He has such strong potential at such a young age. If he doesn't die prematurely in the future, I'm afraid he'll become a supremacy stage powerhouse. I don't know if he can become a supremacy stage powerhouse, but breaking through to the perfected golden immortal stage is absolutely not a problem for him given his aptitude. He's very mysterious and very interesting. Although this old man hasn't left the sect for a long time, I've never encountered such a young man who I can't see through at all. The burly man stared blankly. He didn't expect his master to have such a high evaluation of great Tang Heavenly Emperor. After hesitating for a while, he said, Master, do you want me to investigate his identity after we leave the secret palace? No need. Dala shook his head and said, It's not necessary. I'm indebted to this young man. What? The burly man looked puzzled. Dala didn't speak again. Instead, he was looking forward to Tan Xiao. He was looking forward to Tan Xiao crossing the long bridge, and even hoped that Tan Xiao could obtain the inheritance of Drunken Immortal Supreme. If he could get the inheritance of Drunken Immortal Supreme, he might be able to get some benefits with his relationship with him. On the long bridge, Chivalrous Sword Venerable's eyes gleamed with a cold light. He looked up at Tan Xiao on the 6,000th stair with murderous intent burning in his heart. He was originally very confident that he could become the most outstanding and dazzling peerless genius among the 5th batch of bridge climbers. But who would have thought that a mysterious young man would suddenly appear and take away all the glory that should have belonged to him? He had to settle for second place. This was something that Chivalrous Sword Venerable was extremely unwilling to accept. But when he found that this damn brat stopped at the 6,000th stair and didn't move forward for a long time, he slowly relaxed. It was only a matter of time before he caught up with him and even surpassed him. The most dazzling peerless genius must be me. I'm known as the most talented monstrous genius of the myriad sword sect in the last 10,000 years, so I must be the first to cross the long bridge. I must successfully pass this test, and reach the outside of the drunken immortal palace. I even want to get the inheritance of drunken immortal supreme. By then, all the treasures in this secret palace will belong to me alone. The 6th day. Chivalrous Sword Venerable finally reached the 6,000th stair. He shot a deep look at Tan Xiu and immediately said, "Come and chase me if you still have the strength. I'll let you know that I'm the most dazzling one among the 5th batch of bridge climbers." Having said that, he didn't give Tan Xiu a chance to speak at all. He lifted his right foot again and stepped on the 6,001 SD stair. Tan Xiu looked at his back with a sneer in his eyes. Immediately after, he looked down and found that Star Luminous and Star Pung were only about 200 steps away from the 6,000th stair, whereas Sable Fiend Scorpio was only about 300 steps away from the 6,000th stair. Star Tears, on the other hand, had just passed the 5,000th stair. It would probably take a long time for her to reach the 6,000th stair. Suddenly, Tang Xiu found that Star Tears' body straightened up a lot. A smile climbed up her face, and her pace suddenly quickened as she climbed up the stairs. In just half a day, Star Tears had already reached the 6,000th stair. At this time, Star Luminous and Star Pung were still more than 10 steps away from the 6,000th stair. "I found an interesting problem," said Star Tears with a smile after coming to Tan Xiu's side. "What interesting problem?" asked Tan Xiu, puzzled. "If my guess is correct, all the immortals who break through in the secret palace have to bear the spatial pressure that targets their cultivation level outside," said Star Tears with a smile. "Sable Fiend Scorpio is hiding her strength, but I broke through under the huge pressure." "You broke through?" asked Tan Xiu in surprise. "Yes, I did." Star Tears nodded slowly and smiled. Quickly, Star Luminous and Star Pung reached the 6,000th stair at the same time. However, just when they thought they were stronger than one of Tan Xiu's subordinates, they keenly noticed that a figure beside them also reached the 6,000th stair. "You're a bit slow at the beginning," Sable Fiend Scorpio said slowly with a smile hanging on the corner of her mouth. "Weren't you very slow before, Senior?" Star Luminous was surprised. "And the distance from us?" Sable Fiend Scorpio glanced at Star Tears and lightly smiled. "This proves that my potential is no worse than yours." Tan Xiu slightly smiled and said, "All right, let's stop chatting. Since we've reached the 6,000th stair, let's sprint to the 8,000th stair. If you can reach the 8,000th stair, I can guarantee that you'll pass this test. If you can't reach the 8,000th stair, then don't even think about getting the inheritance of Drunken Immortal Supreme." "I can do it." Although Star Pung felt strenuous, his eyes were extremely firm. "We have our own difficulties, so we must pass," said Star Luminous in a deep voice. "Only by becoming stronger and obtaining the inheritance of Drunken Immortal Supreme can we resolve the crisis facing our families." "Is your family facing a crisis?" asked Tan Xiu lightly. "Do you want me to help you again?" "No need," Star Pung and Star Luminous answered at the same time. Although they guessed that Tan Xiu was one of them, they didn't dare to guarantee it with 100% certainty, so they directly refused. 3 chapters will be updated today. Seeking monthly votes for support. Chapter 1338. Tan Xiu moved forward again. Not only was his speed not slower than before, but it was also slightly faster. Even though the pressure was a bit big, it wasn't unbearable. At the 7,200th step, Tan Xiu finally caught up with Heroic Sword Venerable, who had been talking nonsense before. How is this possible? Heroic Sword Venerable also noticed that Tan Xiu had caught up with him and immediately looked shocked. His mind was shaken, causing his body to stagger and almost be forced back by the oppressive force. A smile outlined on the corner of Tan Xiu's mouth as he lightly said, "Man, never be too arrogant. Never be too arrogant, because if you talk nonsense, you will easily be slapped in the face. If you want to become the most dazzling of the 5th batch of immortals, I'm afraid you can only dream about it." After saying that, Tang Xiu took another step and surpassed Heroic Swordsman Venerable to directly ascend the 7,201st stair. In the following time, he kept pulling away from Chivalrous Sword Venerable under the resentful eyes of the Venerable. In just over a day, Tang Xiu had reached the 8,000th stair. He then turned around and looked down. Tang Xiu saw chivalrous sword venerable struggling to move forward, and saw his angry eyes. He immediately raised his middle finger and contemptuously said, "You're overestimating yourself if you think that rubble can compare with pearls." Puffed, heroic sword venerable coughed up a mouthful of blood after hearing Tang Xiu's words. His body trembled a few times and he directly knelt on one knee. Only then did he barely stabilize his body and didn't retreat. At the bridgehead, thousands of immortals were thoroughly shocked by Tang Xiu. After asking each other, they finally found out Tang Xiu's name, Great Tang Heavenly Emperor. However, no one knew where this Great Tang Heavenly Emperor came from, what sect, and what force he belonged to. Did this Great Tang Heavenly Emperor just pop out from a crack in a rock? With his previous aptitude and cultivation, he should have already become famous in the immortal world. Why have I never heard of this person before? Is Great Tang Heavenly Emperor his real name? He had never heard of it before. Could it be that he was a peerless genius secretly nurtured by some super sect? Did you just start to travel in the immortal world recently? This is too heaven-defying. If he hadn't stayed at the 6,000th step for so many days, I'm afraid he would have passed the test of the long bridge and arrived outside the drunken immortal hall, right? He's not old. I can feel that he's really young. However, such a young man actually had such great potential. It was simply unimaginable. Could it be that in the end, he will be the one to become the successor of drunken immortal supreme? This is too terrifying. His speed was very fast, much faster than any other climber. It's as if the spatial pressure on the bridge didn't have much of an effect. This is the 5th batch of geniuses. Apart from the Great Tang Heavenly Emperor, there were still more than 20 people left on the bridge. This was simply inconceivable. However, the peerless genius of the Wanjian house, the honorable swordsman, seems to be dying. Dala looked at Tang Xiu with a complicated expression. With his eyesight, how could he not see that Tang Xiu was still skillful and at ease? He hadn't even used his full strength under such a huge spatial pressure. I'm afraid those people from the Inner Pill sect and the Everlasting Palace will be out of luck if this boy grows up. He should be related to the Rosefinch Holy Sect. Dala thought silently. At his side, the burly man was shocked and murmured, "This Great Tang Heavenly Emperor is too strong, master. There seems to be no one more powerful than him aside from Black Zephyr. I have a feeling that he can definitely pass the test of the Long Bridge and arrive outside the drunken immortal hall." Dala nodded slowly and said, "There's no objection that he can pass." However, the 4 people around him seem to be very powerful as well. All of them have reached more than 6,800 steps and seem to be able to persist for a long time. The burly man said, "Master, what is the origin of this Great Tang Heavenly Emperor? Why haven't I heard of him before with his aptitude? Also, the 4 people around him have obviously changed their appearance and aura. Could it be that they don't dare to show their true faces? They might have some powerful enemies," said Dala. "If they have any powerful enemies, then their enemies will be in big trouble," said the burly man. "If any of these 5 people grow up and break through to the supremacy stage, I'm afraid they'll be ridiculously strong." At the steps, Starping's eyes flashed with madness. The huge spatial pressure had pushed him to his limit. However, he still persisted for the inheritance and to resolve the crisis for the sect. Puff! Just as he reached the 7,864th step, he finally couldn't withstand the huge pressure and flew backward with a loud bang before heavily crashing on the bridgehead. "I can't accept this." Starping's eyes were bloodshot. He clenched his fists tightly and slammed them on the ground. Star Luminous was 3 steps behind Starpung. His eyes turned completely crazy when he saw Starpung flying backward. They were the only ones who came to the boundless mountain range and entered the secret palace. Now that Starpung had failed, he was the only one left. The pressure in his heart was even greater than the spatial pressure here. Persist. I must persist. Even if I die, I must climb up. Star Luminous gritted his teeth and frantically circulated the immortal force in his body. He had made up his mind that even if he died in this trial, he must not be blasted back by the pressure. Step by step. His body kept trembling, his eyes burned with a crazy flame, and even the muscles all over his body were trembling violently. Persist. This word had become his only belief now. Boom! A surging aura erupted from Star Luminous' body. Almost in an instant he, who was almost withstanding the pressure to his limit, suddenly felt his body lighten. Did I break through? Star Luminous never dreamed that he would break through to the perfected golden immortal stage at this moment. It must be noted that it had only been 700 years since he broke through to the golden immortal stage. Suddenly, he understood a kind of state. The heavenly Tao rewards diligence and perseverance. At this moment, Star Luminous felt the urge to cry. Ever since his grandmaster, the great Tang Heavenly Emperor, failed his tribulation and perished, ever since the Rosefinch Holy Sect was attacked by several forces and was in a precarious situation, ever since his fellow disciples were constantly being killed, and the sect's resources were gradually drying up, he had been persisting and persisting. Many fellow disciples gave up on themselves, reproached themselves, and even fell into despair. But he didn't. With the title of a peerless genius of the Rosefinch Holy Sect, he desperately cultivated, fought, and hovered on the edge of life and death, constantly accumulating strength. The reason he could live until now was entirely due to his tenacious perseverance. There's still a long way to go. Keep going and persevere. Star Luminous took a deep breath. The ecstasy in his eyes was slowly suppressed by him, and replaced with an extraordinarily firm determination. When he took another step forward, he felt much more relaxed. Soon, Star Luminous came to the 8,000th step. When he looked up at Tan Xiao, he found that Tan Xiao's eyes were full of gratification. Gratification? Star Luminous' expression shifted and he respectfully asked, "Did you see that I've broken through, Great Tang Senior?" "Of course." Tan Xiao smiled and said, "You wouldn't have been able to reach the 8,000th step so easily if you hadn't broken through to the perfected golden immortal stage. The Rosefinch Holy Sect is truly blessed. To think that such a peerless genius like you actually appeared here." Star Luminous' expression greatly changed, and his eyes were full of vigilance when he looked at Tan Xiao. "You don't need to be vigilant against me. What you need to understand now is that I have no hostility toward you," Tan Xiao said with a voice transmission. "Otherwise, you and Starping would have been dead before entering the secret palace." Star Luminous stared blankly and immediately came to his senses. He awkwardly said, "I'm sorry, Great Tang Senior." Tan Xiao waved his hand indifferently and said, "I have a deep relationship with your Rosefinch Holy Sect. I didn't expect that you would reach this point now. Alright, let's end our conversation here and move on. I'm sure this test won't be difficult for you if your mind is firm enough." "Understood." Star Luminous replied and stepped on the 8,001st step again. Quickly, Star Tears and Sablefiend Scorpio also reached the 8,000th step. They even surpassed Heroic Sword Venerable of the Myriad Sword Sect. However, Heroic Sword Venerable was only 3 steps away from the 8,000th step. "Let's go. Otherwise, some idiot will brag again if he catches up with us." Tan Xiao faintly glanced at Heroic Sword Venerable and said disdainfully, "You bastard." Heroic Sword Venerable roared angrily. Tan Xiao ignored him, but Star Tear's face was full of murderous intent, as if she wanted to chop Heroic Sword Venerable into pieces. However, she knew that this was not the time to kill Heroic Sword Venerable, so she suppressed her killing intent and followed Tan Xiao to climb up. On the 16th day, Tan Xiao, Star Tears, Star Luminous, and Sablefiend Scorpio passed the Long Bridge test. When the 4 came outside the drunken Immortal Palace, Black Zephyr Old Freak quickly came to greet them. Although he was a bit surprised to see Tan Xiao, he still respectfully said, "Thank you, fellow Immortal." Tan Xiao faintly smiled and shook his head. "You don't need to thank me. It's your good fortune." Black Zephyr Old Freak asked, "Do you have any wish for me to do for you, fellow Immortal?" Tan Xiao transmitted his voice. "I recently got to know a very talented young friend. He's Star Luminous, a peerless genius of the Rosefinch Holy Sect. Coincidentally, he just broke through under the pressure of the Long Bridge just like you. He's now a perfected golden immortal. I'm sure you're aware of the current situation of the Rosefinch Holy Sect. If you really want to thank me, then wait for the time when the Rosefinch Holy Sect is in trouble in the future. Help me." "Understood." Black Zephyr Old Freak carefully observed Star Luminous a few times. Then he silently nodded and said, "We need 9 immortals who have successfully arrived here to activate the 9 stars array together, if we want to enter the drunken immortal palace. We only have 5 people now, so we need 4 more." Chapter 1339. On the 18th day, Chivalrous Sword Venerable passed the bridge test. Among the 900 immortals in the 5th batch, a total of 5 passed the bridge test, which surprised the thousands of immortals below. Then the 6th, 7th, 8th, and 9th batches passed. Finally, when the 9th batch of immortals trial ended, the last 3 people successfully crossed the bridge and arrived outside the drunken immortal palace. Reached 9 people. These 9 people were Black Zephyr, Chivalrous Sword Venerable, Tanxio, Star Tears, Sablefiend Scorpio, Star Luminous, Emo Luafe, Aureate Venerable, and Traceless Iron. Everyone, since we have enough people, let's activate the 9 stars array. After entering the drunken immortal palace, we can only rely on our own opportunities. Let's compete to see who can eventually become drunken immortal supreme's inheritor. Blackhawk Venerable, who had the highest cultivation among the 9 people, and was a late-stage perfected golden immortal, slowly said, "Understood." The others nodded and stood on the 9 nodes of the 9 stars array. As the 9 people poured their immortal force into the array, the 9 stars array was immediately activated, and the hundreds of meters high gate of the drunken immortal palace slowly opened. Enter. The 9 people streamed in and quickly appeared inside the drunken immortal palace. Almost everyone's eyes turned red when they saw a large number of treasures and various cultivation resources inside. Kill. Tanxio, Star Tears, Sablefiend Scorpio, and Star Luminous tacitly attacked Chivalrous Sword Venerable at the same time. Especially under Tanxio's Rainbow Phantasm divine ability, he was momentarily distracted and was bombarded by Sablefiend Scorpio, Star Tears, and Star Luminous. Puff. Although Chivalrous Sword Venerable had been guarding against Tanxio, he never dreamed that 4 powerhouses would attack him at the same time. As his body flew backward into the distance, a divine sword instantly split him into 2 halves. Black Zephyr, Black Hawk, Aureate Venerable, and Traceless Iron's complexion drastically changed. They didn't expect that Tanxio's group of 4 would target a peerless genius from the Myriad Sword sect. Almost in a flash, the 4 people quickly flew in 4 directions. Aside from old monster Black Zephyr, who did not believe that Tanxio would attack him, the other 3 grew wary of Tanxio's group of 4. Old freak Black Zephyr, you should join forces with us. Only by killing everyone else will there be fewer people competing with us for immortal fortune. Black Eagle Supremacy, Golden Afterglow Supremacy, and Traceless Tai. The 3 of them must die here. Tanxio quickly sent a voice transmission to Black Wind Supremacy. Black Zephyr took a deep breath and said, "Golden Dawn Immortal Venerable is the first disciple of Golden Light Island, and I have a deep friendship with her master. Can you spare her life?" Tanxio pondered for a moment and slowly nodded. "No problem. But she must promise me something later." Black Zephyr asked, "What request?" Tanxio said, "She must never tell anyone about us teaming up to kill the enemy, especially about killing the heroic swordsman of the Myriad Sword sect. I even have to swear an immortal oath." Black Zephyr said, "I'll talk to her." After a brief exchange, Tanxio's group of 5 began to hunt down Black Eagle Supremacy and Traceless Tai. Black Eagle Supremacy was a late-stage perfected golden immortal, but he was eventually ruthlessly killed under the influence of Tanxio's Rainbow Phantasm realm. Traceless Tai was just a golden immortal, so he was also easily killed. "I'm willing to give up on snatching the inheritance of Drunken Immortal Supreme." Golden Dawn Immortal Venerable was full of unwillingness and anger, but she could only choose to compromise in order to survive. She looked at the 5 people with vigilance and spoke helplessly. "Black Zephyr Old Freak told me that he has a deep friendship with your master, so we can spare your life," Tanxio said indifferently. "But you must swear an immortal oath that you must never tell anyone about what happened in the Drunken Immortal Palace." Golden Dawn Immortal Venerable shot a complicated look at Black Zephyr, and immediately swore an immortal oath. "You've sworn an immortal oath, so you're our friend now," said Tanxio with satisfaction. "As for Drunken Immortal Supreme's inheritance, whether you can obtain it or not will depend on your own ability. We naturally won't interfere. Aureate Dawn Immortal Venerable asked incredulously. You mean, I can still compete for the inheritance of Drunken Immortal Supreme? Yes you can. Tanshio nodded. As long as you can pass the next test, even if you become the final winner, we will still congratulate you. Golden Dawn Immortal Venerable's unwillingness and anger immediately vanished. She shot a grateful look at Tanshio and said, If I finally get the inheritance of Drunken Immortal Supreme, and can control the entire secret palace, I'll take out half of the remaining wealth and give it to you all. Tanshio smiled and said, In that case we will thank you in advance. Very soon, Black Zephyr and Golden Dawn Immortal Venerable left in a hurry. The Drunken Immortal Palace was very big, and no one knew where the inheritance ground was, so they chose to split up and search on their own. Star Luminous took a deep breath and cupped his fists at Tanshio. Great Tang Sr., they've left, so I'm going to find my own immortal fate. If I can finally get the inheritance of Drunken Immortal Supreme, I'll also give you half of the wealth here to express my gratitude. Tanshio waved his hand and smilingly said, Remember my words. As long as there's life, there's hope. Don't lose your life here even if you can't get the inheritance in the end. The future Rosefinch Holy Sect will need you. Understood. This junior will keep it in mind. Star Luminous respectfully saluted and then quickly left. Star Tears watched Star Luminous leave and sighed. He's a good kid. If he doesn't die prematurely in the future, the Rosefinch Holy Sect will probably have another supremacy stage powerhouse. Tanshio nodded and said, The path to immortality is long and no one knows what will happen in the future. I'm looking forward to the day he becomes a supreme. Star Tears nodded without a word and asked, So what should we do next? Sablefiend Scorpio, you may be my subordinate, but I brought you here to find your immortal fate. Tanshio lightly smiled. If you can get the inheritance of Drunken Immortal Supreme, I'll immediately return your soul plate to you and look forward to the day you become a supremacy stage powerhouse. Sablefiend Scorpio stared blankly for a moment before a grateful look appeared in her eyes. She followed Tanshio to the secret palace, thinking that she could get some wealth here for her future cultivation. She had fantasized about getting the inheritance countless times, but she thought that Tanshio wouldn't give her this opportunity. But only now did she realize that she was wrong. Her master respected her. He didn't treat her like a subordinate or a slave, but treated her like one of his own. He's worthy of my loyalty. His life was saved by him from the convict arena. Even if I get the inheritance of Drunken Immortal Supreme, and he returns my soul plate to me, I must serve him for 5,000 years in the future. This is my repayment to him. Sablefiend Scorpio thought inwardly and quickly left in a direction. Only Tanshio and Star Tears were left. Tanshio smilingly said, Anti-Star Tears, it's very difficult for you to break through to the supremacy stage given your current aptitude. However, it's easy for you to get the inheritance of Drunken Immortal Supreme, since I'm here. Let's go. To the Drunken Immortal Spring. What do you mean? Asked Star Tears, confused. Just follow me and you'll know, said Tanshio with a faint smile. Half a day later, Tanshio took Star Tears and came to the Drunken Immortal Spring in the central area of the Drunken Immortal Palace. All the restrictions and traps along the way seemed to pose no threat to them. Anti-Star Tears, I'll break the Drunken Immortal Spring's restriction. You can go directly to receive the inheritance. Whether or not you can occupy the entire secret palace will depend on your good fortune. After saying that, Tanshio cast tens of thousands of seals one after another. A transparent energy shield rose and a half-meter wide and 2-meter high gap was opened, allowing Star Tears to directly pass through the gap. This is the Drunken Immortal Spring? The place to get the inheritance of Drunken Immortal Supreme? Star Tears had 100% trust in Tanshio. She looked at the space inside and felt the green liquid spewing out from the spirit spring a few meters high. She was slightly excited inside. Immediately after, her figure directly plunged into the Drunken Immortal Spring. Heavens! This dark green liquid is actually the Prime Life liquid? Star Tears could feel a huge amount of vitality continuously pouring into her body. Therefore, her appearance was restored to its original appearance. Moreover, after the primary life fluid was poured into her body, her appearance had a wonderful change. She became younger and more full of vitality. When all the prime life liquid in the drunken immortal spring entered Star Tear's body, a mass of golden light at the bottom of the drunken immortal spring instantly enveloped Star Tears, and countless ancient golden characters turned into a torrent that drilled into Star Tear's sea of knowledge. Time ticked by and half a year passed in the blink of an eye. Half a year passed. Black Zephyr was the one who discovered this courtyard, but Tang Xiu had secretly adjusted the restrictions here, making it difficult for Black Zephyr to step inside. Boom! The entire secret palace shook and the complexions of the hundreds of thousands of immortals who were still alive changed. They didn't understand what happened in the secret palace, but a bad hunch still grew in their hearts. Get out! The moment Star Tears opened her eyes, hundreds of thousands of immortals were wrapped by an invisible force and directly teleported out of the secret palace. However, there were two exceptions, Sablefiend Scorpio and Star Luminous. Under the effect of Star Tears, the two of them directly appeared in front of Tan Xiu. What's going on? Sablefiend Scorpio and Star Luminous exchanged dismayed glances. Their eyes just swept past Tan Xiu's face and then immediately fell on Star Tears, who was floating above the drunken immortal spring. The two of them could feel a special fluctuation emanating from Star Tears, which made them somewhat palpitate. Your Martial Granduncle Zeng? Star Luminous observed Star Tears' appearance, and suddenly knelt before her, and called out with an excited face. Star Tears smiled and lifted Star Luminous up with a stream of chi. She then lightly smiled and said, "I didn't expect to be recognized by you, little fella." "That's great." Star Luminous' eyes were full of tears as he called out excitedly, "The third chapter is over. I'm looking for a monthly vote." Chapter 1340. Tan Xiu looked at Star Tears with a smile on his face and asked, "You've obtained the inheritance of Drunken Immortal Supreme? Is it possible for you to break through to the supremacy stage?" "I can break through to the supremacy stage within 100 years, answered Star Tears with a smile. Tan Xiu nodded with satisfaction and said, "If that's the case, then take these two kids back. Otherwise, it won't be easy for them to return to the Rosefinch Holy Sect safely given their strength." Star Tears hesitated and said, "I want to stay here and cultivate for 100 years. I'll go back after I break through to the supremacy stage." Tan Xiu pondered for a moment. Then he took out two items from his interspatial ring and handed them to Star Tears, saying, "With these you may be able to break through to the supremacy stage in 100 years. Since you've chosen to stay here, then stay. There is already a lot of wealth in this secret palace. When you go back, take these things with you." Star Tears nodded slowly. Her pupils suddenly shrunk when she saw the two items handed over by Tan Xiu. A look of ecstasy burst from her eyes and she excitedly said, "Earth Core? 5-colored dragon pearl? These two items were both treasures. They're very important to me now. With them, I can break through to the supremacy stage in a few decades at most." Tan Xiu faintly smiled and looked at Sablefiend Scorpio. "Now that this secret palace has a master, let's leave first." Sablefiend Scorpio pondered for a moment and asked, "Master, you and Venerable Star Tears are. It's not the time for you to know about it yet." Tan Xiu shook his head. "Just wait. I'll naturally tell you when I break through to the supremacy stage." Sablefiend Scorpio nodded silently and no longer asked. On the contrary, Star Luminous' excitement had yet to recede after learning Star Tears' true identity. He originally thought that Star Tears' great martial grandaunt had died in battle in some corner of the immortal world, and that the Rosefinch Holy Sect only had him and Star Pung on this trip to the secret palace. He didn't expect to see Star Tears' great martial grandaunt, and even obtain the inheritance of Drunken Immortal Supreme. God bless the Rosefinch Holy Sect. Star Luminous took a deep breath and looked at Tan Xiu. He quietly observed him for a while and then asked, "Granduncle Zeng, who exactly is he?" "You don't need to know it now." Star Tears shook her head. "You just need to know that you must be respectful when you see him in the future. This is..." Although Star Luminous was somewhat unwilling, he still nodded in agreement. After a while, Star Tears teleported Tang Xiao and Sablefiend Scorpio to a forested area millions of kilometers away from the secret palace. Almost without the slightest pause, the duo turned into a wisp of green smoke and flashed lightning fast toward the nearest teleportation array. During this trip to the secret palace, both of them received a lot of treasures. Especially before they left, Star Tears instantly collected a lot of immortal treasures, immortal crystals, and crystal essences from all over the secret palace and gave them to Tang Xiao. The amount was enough to last the Great Tang Empire for thousands of years. A few months later, Tang Xiao and Sablefiend Scorpio appeared in the Great Peng Immortal Domain, and then stayed in the Great Peng Immortal Domain's main city, Fengluo City. After inquiring about the news, it was finally determined that the battle for the secret palace had come to an end, but no one knew who got the inheritance of Drunken Immortal Supreme. Additionally, there was also news that the Inner Pill sect and the Everlasting Palace suffered huge losses in this trip to the secret palace. The Inner Pill sect lost more than a dozen perfected golden immortals and hundreds of golden immortals. The Everlasting Palace, on the other hand, was even worse. They had lost more than a dozen perfected golden immortals, and nearly 200 golden immortals. However, for the two powerful sects, these losses were still barely bearable. However, when the 10,000 Sword sect leader found out about the 10,000 Sword sect's losses, he was so enraged that he smashed the palace he lived in, killing thousands of servants in the palace. A total of 100,000 perfected golden immortals and 46 golden immortals. Most importantly, their myriad Sword sect's peerless genius, heroic swordsman Venerable, also died in the secret palace. It must be noted that heroic swordsman Venerable was the biological son of the myriad Sword sect's sect master, and had an 80 to 90% chance of becoming the sect master's successor. Pristine immortal Confucianist sect's Tao Master Qingfeng is being chased by the myriad Sword sect's powerhouses. Undemonized Sovereign Mo is seriously injured and his fate is unknown. A piece of news reached the ears of Tang Xiao and Sablefiend Scorpio. In a flash, Tang Xiao made up his mind to go to the neighboring 100 Blind Immortal Domain to save Tao Master Qingfeng. However, given their strength, they couldn't be too reckless even if they wanted to save someone. They must have the support of accurate information to save someone safely, and then immediately escape. 100 Blind Immortal Domain. In a barren rocky area, Tao Master Qingfeng looked anxiously at the unconscious undemonized Sovereign Mo in his arms. His flying speed was extremely fast, but the 4 perfected golden immortals and dozens of golden immortals chasing closely behind him made him feel a strong sense of powerlessness in his heart. Cough cough. In the midst of fleeing, the unconscious undemonized Sovereign Mo finally woke up. Looking at the anxious Tao Master Qingfeng who was fleeing with him, a bitter smile appeared on his face and he said, "Haven't you gotten rid of those myriad Sword sect bastards yet?" "Nope. They're all crazy and won't let us go." Tao Master Qingfeng forced a smile. Undemonized Sovereign Mo swallowed a purple scent pill and adjusted his breathing for a moment. Then he sighed while flying with Tao Master Qingfeng. The myriad Sword sect suffered huge losses in the secret palace this time. I'm afraid nearly half of their entire force was lost in the secret palace. That's why they're venting all their anger on us. Let them vent their anger on us if they want to. Tao Master Qingfeng sneered. I'm happy as long as they can kill more myriad Sword sect's people. Undemonized Sovereign Mo chuckled. That's not your style at all. You've always been merciful, just like those old bald donkeys in the Western Buddhist world. How come you've become such a character now? Taoist Master Qingfeng smiled and said, The myriad Sword sect is a bunch of despicable and shameless bastards. The more of them die, the fewer people they will bully and kill in the future. Being merciful to this sect is the same as being cruel to others. I can't wait for them to die cleanly. Ha ha ha. Undemonized Sovereign Mo laughed aloud and said, Tao Master Qingfeng, I used to think that you're very pedantic, but I didn't expect that you'd also become a sentimental person. As long as we can get out of danger this time, I'll make the myriad Sword sect pay a painful price in the future. Don't act recklessly, Wuxia, said Tao Master Qingfeng hurriedly. The myriad Sword sect may have suffered heavy losses this time, but a starving camel is still bigger than a horse. That's right. Dao Master Guai once said that, so don't act recklessly. If you get caught by the myriad sword sect's powerhouses, it won't feel good. I know what I'm doing. Undemonized Sovereign Mo sneered. Offending the myriad sword sect is equivalent to offending the everlasting palace. However, I have a faint feeling that someone seems to be targeting the inner pill sect and the everlasting palace in this secret palace trip. The two sects' disciples have been killed inside the secret palace. You're not the only one who has this feeling, I also have it. Dao Master Qingfeng nodded. The inner pill sect and the everlasting palace have suffered heavy losses in this secret palace trip. It's much bigger than the other sections. Undemonized Sovereign Mo's expression shifted as he said, Do you think it's the Rosefinch Holy Sect's people? The Rosefinch Holy Sect has been badly bullied by these two sects all these years. If the Rosefinch Holy Sect's people were to launch an ambush on these two sects when the secret palace opens, they can still inflict serious damage to them. I don't think it's possible. Dao Master Qingfeng shook his head. That's because the Rosefinch Holy Sect was forced by the Inner Pill Sect and the Everlasting Palace to hole up in the Rosefinch Holy Sect's encampment. They don't dare to easily leave their protective array. Furthermore, as far as I know, Great Emperor Danqing and the other supremacy of the Everlasting Palace have been blockading the Rosefinch Holy Sect's mainland. It's very difficult for the Rosefinch Holy Sect's people to come out. It's very difficult, but it's not like there's no way out, said Undemonized Sovereign Mo. Forget it. Let's not talk about them. Dao Master Qingfeng shook his head and sighed. The most important thing for us now is to find a way to get rid of the myriad sword sect's pursuit. This is the 100 Blind Immortal Domain. Are you familiar with this immortal domain? I've been here once, but I'm not familiar with it. Undemonized Sovereign Mo shook his head. That's troublesome then. Dao Master Qingfeng sighed. Our speed is too slow. If the situation continues to develop like this, we'll be overtaken by them again in half a day at most. For a moment, the two of them felt helpless and at their wits' end. Suddenly, Dao Master Qingfeng's complexion changed. A vigilant look burst from his eyes as he shouted sternly, Come out! We've already found you! Ha ha ha, so what if we've found you? Since you've fallen into our trap, you're dead for sure. 4 figures appeared out of thin air in front of the duo. The one in the lead was the perfected golden immortal of the Myriad Sword Sect, Black Duck Venerable. Dao Master Qingfeng frowned deeply and asked, How did you figure out our escape route? Moreover, you came here one step ahead and waited for us here? Black Duck Venerable smiled proudly. Before you escaped last time, our Myriad Sword Sect's people secretly planted the Myriad Miles fragrance on you. So no matter where you escape to, we'll find you quickly. Most importantly, the owner of the 100 Blind Immortal Domain Stone City is our Myriad Sword Sect's people. You two didn't expect this, did you? I'm the owner of the Stone City, Heavenly Rock Old Man. Of course, I'm also a disciple of the Myriad Sword Sect. An old man with a white beard and long silver hair sneered. The way he looked at Dao Master Qingfeng, an undemonized Sovereign Mo, was full of contempt. Black Duck Venerable took out 7 black flags from his interspatial ring, and quickly arranged the 7 heavenly demon sealing array in the surroundings. Then he looked at Dao Master Qingfeng and undemonized Sovereign Mo with a playful expression. I'll continue with 3 chapters today. I weep for monthly votes. Chapter 1341. Dao Master Qingfeng suddenly understood, and shook his head with a sigh. It seems that the direction we fled to is your territory. No wonder you could find us so easily, and even judge the direction we fled to. Forget it. Since you're so persistent in chasing us, let's have a good fight. You'll have to pay a heavy price if you want to keep us here. You're right. Black Duck Venerable nodded. We do have to pay a certain price to kill both of you. But will you still think so when you see it? With that said, he took out a scroll from his interspatial ring and cast a spell. The scroll instantly flew up and slowly unfolded in the air. It was a scroll with a total of 18 patterns on it, each of which was a strange-looking weapon. Even on the scroll, the 18 weapons still exuded a chilling murderous aura. The Immortal Punishing Armament Manual? A horrified expression appeared on Qing Feng's face as he cried out involuntarily in disbelief. You recognize it? Black Duck Venerable smugly smiled. We spent a lot of effort to obtain the Immortal Punishing Armament Manual of your pristine Immortal Confucian sect. Now that we're using your pristine Immortal Confucian sect's supreme treasure to deal with you, the price we'll have to pay will be much smaller, no? Haha. Dao Master Qing Feng burst out with intense killing intent and shouted. My Grandmaster, White Goat Immortal Venerable, was killed by your myriad sword sect. That's right. You guessed it right. Black Duck Venerable grinned. I'm not afraid to tell you that I was one of the people involved in the battle more than 1,300 years ago. White Goat Immortal Venerable is indeed very strong. He's a late-stage perfected Golden Immortal, but he was able to withstand the siege of 6 perfected Golden Immortals by himself. He was even able to last for half a day before being killed. This achievement is very dazzling. Unfortunately, he still died in the end, and he died at our hands. You weren't there at that time. Else you could have seen the moment his immortal soul self-detonated. Dao Master Qing Feng's eyes turned bloodshot. A combat robe appeared on the surface of his body, and an ancient book appeared in his hand out of thin air. An 8th grade defensive combat robe, and an 8th grade offensive weapon were his trump cards and also his trump cards. Revenge. Blood for blood, a tooth for a tooth. Immortal Qing Feng had gone crazy. He had never hated someone so much. He wished he could tear Black Duck Venerable to pieces. In the past, the person who had treated him the best was not his master, but his grandmaster, White Goat Immortal Venerable, who had been killed more than 1,300 years ago. Exaltemo glanced at the clear wind sage, and sighed inside. He then took out a jade bottle from his space ring and popped a pill into his mouth. Instantly, the originally heavily injured Ling Xian's aura began to rise. In the span of a dozen breaths, his aura had already surpassed his peak. Qing Feng, we only have an hour. If we can kill them all within an hour, we'll be able to survive. If we can't kill them all in half an hour, we'll be the ones to die in the end. Let's fight. Today I, Sovereign Wuxia, will accompany you in your madness. Spiritual Master Qing Feng didn't reply, but he used his actions to tell him that he would fight. After the ancient book in his hand flew into the air, golden characters flowed out of the ancient book like flowing water. With endless changes, they bombarded the Black Duck Venerable Immortal. A flying knife appeared in Sovereign Wuxia's hand. The flying knife, which seemed to be only a few inches long, instantly turned into tens of thousands of knife shadows, shooting toward Black Duck Venerable and the other 3 from all directions. Lightning condensation technique. He formed a hand seal, and lightning fell from the sky. These lightning did not directly attack Black Duck Venerable and the other 3. Instead, they bombarded the knife shadows of the flying knives. Suddenly, the lightning strands connected the tens of thousands of knife shadows, forming a net of electric knives. Black Duck Venerable's eyes revealed a dignified expression, as the painting emitted a dazzling golden light. The weapons on the 18 pictures rushed toward Sage Qing Feng and Sovereign Wuxia. The 18 weapons formed a special formation, and clashed with the countless words and saber shadows. Divine Weapon and Dharma Technique. The 6 people on both sides displayed their divine abilities. As soon as they attacked, all of them used their strongest killer moves. Half an hour later, Black Crow Immortal Venerable revealed a disdainful expression, because he had heard clearly that undemonized Venerable Wuxia said that he could only last for an hour, and it should be related to the pill he had swallowed. Condense finger sword slash. Black Crow Venerable keenly sensed that Sovereign Wuxia's aura was rapidly weakening. He was overjoyed and rushed to the front of Sovereign Wuxia, trying to kill him in one blow. Let's die together. Undemonized Sovereign Wuxia suddenly roared, and his aura surged once more. Almost in an instant he appeared in front of Black Crow Venerable. As he took out his natal immortal sword, it pierced through the shadow left by Black Crow Venerable. Puff! Behind Black Crow Venerable Immortal, a perfected Golden Immortal from Myriad Sword Sect never dreamed that an attack would come from Black Duck Venerable Immortal's direction. Caught off guard, he had no time to dodge, and he didn't even have time to defend himself before a bowl-sized hole appeared in his chest. Black Crow Venerable dodged and saw the miserable appearance of his companion. Suddenly, deep regret grew in his heart, and his killing intent almost materialized. He understood that he had been tricked by undemonized Wuxia. He had consumed a single medicinal pill, causing him to be able to endure for more than an hour. In fact, the target of his attack just now wasn't him. Instead, after careful calculation, his target was his companion. In an instant, Black Crow Venerable did not continue to attack Sovereign Wuxia. Instead, he quickly took out a jet black jade bottle and put his companion's immortal soul into the jade bottle. Kill. The other two perfected golden immortals fiercely blasted revered Qing Feng away. Then one of them turned around and rushed toward undemonized Sovereign Mo. In almost an instant, he bombarded undemonized Sovereign Mo's chest with his natal immortal weapon. However, although he seriously injured Sovereign Wuxia, he was also injured by Sovereign Wuxia's flying dagger. If not for his high-grade defensive immortal weapon, he would have been seriously injured. I'm in a desperate situation. There's a formation, I can't escape. Sovereign Wuxia felt a little bitter in his heart, but he did not regret it. For his friends, even if he lost his life here, he had no regrets. What made him regret was that he could not drag Black Duck Venerable and the other three down with him. Explode your immortal soul. Even if I can't kill them, at least I will make them pay a painful price. Sovereign Wuxia took a deep breath and prepared to explode his immortal soul. Buzz. An invisible force came directly from outside the formation. Almost in an instant, a 1,000-meter-long light shadow divine soared directly toward the surrounding formation and slashed the back of the Zenith Heaven Golden Immortal, who had just been attacked by Sovereign Wuxia. Even if the opponent had a high-grade defensive immortal weapon, his head was already split in half. What? Black Crow Venerable and the other Zenith Heaven Golden Immortal showed a horrified expression at the same time. At this moment, the time in front of the two suddenly changed, and even their bodies stiffened at this moment. Puff, puff, puff. The seriously injured Dao Master Qing Feng and Sovereign Wuxia used all their strength to launch a final attack, directly bombarding Black Duck Venerable and the other Zenith Heaven Golden Immortal. Although it did not cause fatal damage to the two, it sent them flying. Shadowless Scorpion Tail. A black shadow blocked the way of Black Duck Venerable's backward flight, and then a scorpion tail shot out, directly piercing his abdomen. At the same time, a long whip was lashed out from the Black Shadow's hand, bombarding the immortal soul that escaped from Black Duck Venerable's body. The sudden change of events made Dao Master Qing Feng and Sovereign Wuxia ecstatic. This caused Sage Qing Feng and Sovereign Mo to reveal expressions of ecstasy. Although they did not know the origins of the two people who had helped them, they were certain that the two people who had helped them in a desperate situation were definitely friends. Kill. After the four killed Black Duck Venerable, they did not hesitate to join forces at the same time, and launched a fierce attack on the Myriad Sword Sect's Zenith Heaven Golden Immortal, who had just suffered a serious injury. In just a few minutes, the Zenith Heaven Golden Immortal was killed by the four people amidst his angry and unwilling roars. Dao Master Qing Feng took a few deep breaths to calm his boiling blood energy, and sealed the bleeding wounds on his body. Then he looked at Sovereign Wuxia and asked, "How are you? Can you still hold on?" Sovereign Wuxia's pale face squeezed out a smile that was uglier than crying. He shook his head and nodded to Tan Xiao and Sablefiend Scorpio. Then he directly fell to the ground, took out a purple scent pill, and then sat cross-legged to heal his injuries. A touched look flashed in Dao Master Qing Feng's eyes. When his eyes moved away from Sovereign Mo, he looked at Tan Xiao and Sablefiend Scorpio and cupped his fists. "Thank you for your help. This Dao Master Qing Feng will never forget your great kindness. May I ask who these two friends are?" "I'm Great Tang Heavenly Emperor and she's my subordinate," said Tan Xiao with a smile. Dao Master Qing Feng looked surprised and asked, "Your Great Tang Heavenly Emperor? The mysterious powerhouse who appeared in the secret palace?" "I'm not a powerhouse, but I do have a bit of talent," said Tan Xiao with a smile. "Your name, Great Tang Heavenly Emperor, has spread to most of the immortal world through various channels," sighed Dao Master Qing Feng. "Many powerhouses know about your stunning performance during the Long Bridge test in the secret palace. Many even speculated that you were the one who obtained the inheritance of Drunken Immortal Supreme. The secret palace of Drunken Immortal Supreme should still be in the boundless mountain range, right? Tanshio chuckled. How could I be the lucky one who appeared here? As for fame, it's not a good thing for me. After all, I understand the saying that the tallest tree in the forest will be destroyed by the wind. That makes sense. Dao Master Qing Feng nodded slowly. But there's something I don't understand. I don't have any friendship with Great Tang Heavenly Emperor, so why did you help me? Chapter 1342. Tanshio glanced at undemonized Sovereign Mo, who was sitting cross-legged in cultivation not far away, and smilingly said, There are 2 reasons. Firstly, Taoist Master Qing Feng is a good person who values friendship and friendship. Therefore, before the secret palace opened, and during the battle outside the boundless mountain range, there were so many friends who bravely stepped forward to help you. This shows that you're a friend worth making. And this Great Tang Heavenly Emperor loves making friends the most. Second, I have some friendship with Tao Master Guai of the pristine Immortal Confucianist sect. You're his senior brother, so how can I just stand by and watch when you're in danger? I'll always remember the life-saving grace of Great Tang Heavenly Emperor, said Tao Master Qing Feng seriously. You're my friend from now on, and you can speak freely if you need anything in the future. I'll do it as long as it's within my capabilities. Also, I didn't expect that you and my junior brother are acquainted. I'll talk to him about it when I get back. He never mentioned a friend like Great Tang Heavenly Emperor to me. It's really wrong of him. No need to talk about it. Tanshio chuckled. Maybe he doesn't even know where this friend called Great Tang Heavenly Emperor came from. Ha ha ha. Tao Master Qing Feng stared blankly and looked confused. We don't need to be too entangled in this matter. Tanshio waved his hand. Where are you going, Tao Master Qing Feng? We can go together if it's on the way, but we'll escort you out of this immortal domain if it's not on the way. Tao Master Qing Feng hesitated and forced a smile. Undemonized Sovereign Mo and I are seriously injured, so I'm afraid we'll drag you down if we go with you. This is the Myriad Sword Sect's territory. Tanshio raised his brows and lightly smiled. It's fine. You can avoid being tracked by anyone from the Myriad Sword Sect if you enter my Heavenly Abode artifact. As for us, the Myriad Sword Sect should have no time to deal with us. Tao Master Qing Feng hesitated and finally agreed. He could see that this Great Tang Heavenly Emperor didn't have any intention to harm them. Otherwise, they would have been dead if he didn't save them. After a while, Tanshio moved Tao Master Qing Feng and undemonized Sovereign Mo into the Heavenly Abode artifact he brought with him. Then he looked at Sablefiend Scorpio and slowly said, I didn't expect this trip to the secret palace would make me famous. He was even suspected by countless immortals to be the lucky one who obtained the Drunken Immortal Supreme's inheritance. It seems like we need to create some trouble and make a name for ourselves. You're right, Master. Sablefiend Scorpio nodded. The secret palace is still there. And as long as you prove that you are not in the secret palace at this time, you can break the rumor that you have obtained the inheritance of Drunken Immortal Supreme. Otherwise, not only us, but even the Great Tang Empire will be targeted and attacked by countless forces from the immortal world. Tanshio thought for a moment and asked, Are you familiar with this immortal domain or the nearby immortal domains? I'm very familiar with the ethereal immortal domain, which is 3 immortal domains away from here, said Sablefiend Scorpio. I even have a friendship with the ethereal immortal domain's city lord. Tanshio said without hesitation. In that case, let's go there. Suddenly, Tanshio's complexion changed because he was keenly aware that dozens of powerful auras were rushing toward their direction. Almost all of the owners of those auras were golden immortals. They should be the Myriad Sword Sect's people. However, there are too many of them, so we can't fight with them. Let's leave first. We'll deal with them later, said Tanshio in a deep voice. Sablefiend Scorpio pondered for a moment and suddenly said, How about you let me kill some of them before leaving, Master? Even if I can't kill all of them, it won't be a problem to kill a few of them and create some trouble for them. Tanshio gave it a thought and handed the Thunder Core he bought before to Sablefiend Scorpio. Then he said, Then I'll be on my way first. When you arrive in the next immortal domain, come directly to the main city to find me. I'll be waiting for you at the gate of the biggest city in that immortal domain. Alright. Sable Fiend Scorpio looked pleasantly surprised when she saw the Thunder Core. With this Thunder Core, she could definitely deal a heavy blow to the enemy. A quarter of an hour after Tang Xiu left, tens of golden immortals flew over in a group. When they saw the aftermath of the battle, each and every one of them became vigilant. According to the agreement with the 4 perfected golden immortals, they were to wait for Dao Master Qing Feng, an undemonized sovereign Mo, at the same spot after killing them. But now, not only were the 4 perfected golden immortals gone, but even Dao Master Qing Feng and undemonized sovereign Mo had also disappeared without a trace. What was the outcome? It was the question they were thinking about. Suddenly, a late-stage golden immortal's complexion suddenly changed. Almost in a flash, a black shadow shot over, and he burst out with the fastest speed he could muster in his life and bolted to the distance. Boom! A terrifying explosion shrouded a radius of tens of kilometers. The dreadful aftermath rushed hundreds of kilometers away. The dozens of golden immortals were caught off guard, and were directly killed by the explosive power of the Thunder Core. The others were also seriously injured, and were sent flying upside down while spurting out blood. At least 5 million crystal essences are needed to purchase a Thunder Pill. Its might is indeed terrifying. Even a perfected golden immortal would be seriously injured if caught off guard by the explosion, no? Sable Fiend Scorpio grinned. Her figure flickered lightning fast after unleashing her shaman artifact, and frantically harvested the lives of the severely injured golden immortals nearby. In just a quarter of an hour, more than a dozen golden immortals died tragically in her hands. Let's join forces and kill her. The golden immortal, who escaped the fastest and only suffered minor injuries, flew back and shouted fiercely. Immediately, the remaining golden immortals gathered together and unleashed their innate natal artifacts at the same time, planning to fight Sable Fiend Scorpio to the death. Sable Fiend Scorpio didn't want to entangle with the other side at all, because the combined attack power of a dozen golden immortals was still very terrifying. Even if she was confident that she could kill all of them, she would also suffer heavy injuries. In addition, she was also worried that the other powerhouses of Myriad Sword Sect would rush to support them. 10 days later, Sable Fiend Scorpio and Tan Xiu met in a nearby immortal domain, and quickly rushed to the ethereal immortal domain without any hesitation. Along the way, although the two of them encountered some troubles, they were all small troubles to them and were easily dealt with. However, it could be said that Tang Xiu had gone to great lengths to make himself famous. Every time he dealt with an enemy, he would announce his title as Great Tang Heavenly Emperor. Therefore, by the time he and Sable Fiend Scorpio arrived at the ethereal immortal domain, some forces who gathered intelligence quickly learned that Great Tang Heavenly Emperor was not in the secret palace, and determined that he was not the lucky one who obtained the inheritance of Drunken Immortal Supreme. Ethereal Immortal Domain. On the continent where the Everlasting Palace's branch was located, more than a dozen perfected golden immortals and hundreds of golden immortals walked out of the spatial teleportation array and appeared near the floating snow city. Clad in a white battle robe, Argent Marshal Hale, who had long hair draped over his shoulders, suppressed his anger and looked respectfully at a black-robed old man, saying, "Sir Cambrian, this subordinate has some private matters to deal with, so I won't be going back to the floating snow city with you. If you have any instructions for me, just call me with the message token, and this subordinate will definitely rush over immediately." The black-robed old man indifferently glanced at Argent Marshal Hale and sneered inwardly. He knew the reason why Argent Marshal Hale wanted to leave. It was because he was often bullied by the other disciples of the Everlasting Palace, so he wanted to hide far away. He was disgusted by a traitor like Argent Marshal Hale, so he didn't want him to follow him all the time. He waved his hand as though he was shooing away a fly and impatiently said, "Hurry up and leave if you want to. Don't be an eyesore following me. Also, get more cultivation resources later. I'll be very happy if you find some good stuff." "Understood. I'll immediately present it to you once I find something good," said Argent Marshal Hale respectfully. The black-robed old man nodded indifferently, and then quickly left with a group of golden immortals and perfected golden immortals, leaving behind only Argent Marshal Hale, whose appearance was gradually changing. Damn son of a bitch. Wait until I'm completely out of your control, and no longer bound by the everlasting palace. I'll kill all of you one by one. Just you wait. Argent Marshal Hale clenched his fists and a soul-stirring killing intent burst out from his eyes. He missed the days when he followed Star Cultivation Great Emperor. The feeling of being high and mighty, the unfettered comfort, and the inexhaustible supply of various resources. Traitor. The name didn't sound good, and he felt a bit guilty inside. But compared to surviving, he chose the heavy betrayal. Sometimes he even hated his master, Star Cultivation Great Emperor. Why did he fail to transcend the tribulation? Why did he lose his shelter? Half a day later, Argent Marshal Hale quietly entered Floating Snow City alone, and came to a low-rise residential area from a small path. When he pushed open the door to a courtyard and stepped inside, he saw a particularly seductive woman with a hot figure. He rushed to her in a flash and reached out to embrace her. "Did you miss me, Achin?" asked Argent Marshal Hale with a smile after kissing her. Upon seeing Argent Marshal Hale, the coquettish woman felt a bit of contempt inwardly. But on the surface, she revealed a bright smile and said in a sweet voice, "Yes, I do. I miss you all the time. I'm always thinking about getting your favor, and the feeling of being hugged by you. I even dreamt of you coming back a few days ago. Promise me that you won't leave again after you come back." Argent Marshal Hale grunted a few times, and was about to enter the house while hugging her. "No, it's inconvenient. It's inconvenient for me now," the seductive girl hurriedly called out. "What?" Argent Marshal Hale stared blankly for a moment, before an angry look appeared in his eyes. He directly threw the seductive girl out and said with a cold face, "Since it's inconvenient for you, then I'll come to you another day. I just remembered that I have something to do, so I'll be going first." The third update is over. Seeking monthly votes and recommendation votes for support. Additionally, Quiet Night's WeChat official account is currently updating its Immortal World character series. The wonderful series will continue after the finale at the end of the month. Brothers and sisters, please pay attention to Quiet Night's WeChat official account. Quiet Night's WeChat official account is JYGS00, or directly search for Quiet Night in the WeChat subscription account. Chapter 1343. Driftsnow City, Live Plume Mansion. This continuous stretch of palaces was the largest home of gentleness in the Driftsnow City, the women's pavilion. At the same time, it was also a man's paradise, a money-squandering den. According to the statistics of some immortals who liked women, there were at least 100,000 girls in the Live Plume Mansion. There were all kinds of female prostitutes and immortal prostitutes. After Argent Marshal Hale left the captive woman's place, he immediately rushed to the Live Plume Mansion, and generously took out some immortal crystals he got from the secret palace to reward the two immortal prostitutes who accompanied him. He didn't realize that the moment he stepped into the Live Plume Mansion, there was a tail behind him. Sablefiend Scorpio, who was disguised as a gigolo, followed closely behind Tan Xiao. The moment she stepped into the Live Plume Mansion's gate, her always cold face revealed a somewhat unnatural look. Although she had roamed the immortal world for thousands of years, she had never been to a place like this before. Tan Xiao's ice-cold eyes were fixed on Argent Marshal Hale's back. He hated the enemies of the Inner Pill sect and the Everlasting Palace, but he hated traitors even more. Furthermore, this person was his personal disciple, a peerless genius that he had once regarded highly and seriously nurtured. He noticed Argent Marshal Hale outside the Floating Snow City's gate, but he didn't act rashly to alert him. Instead, he followed him from a distance, and even monitored the meeting between Argent Marshal Hale and that seductive woman. "Master, I'll just kill him. With his current strength, I can kill him within 10 breaths at most," Sablefiend Scorpio replied in a low voice. Tan Xiao shook his head. He looked at the private room opposite and indifferently said, "Do you know what Argent Marshal Hale is best at?" "What is it?" Sablefiend Scorpio was confused. Tan Xiao said lightly, "Save my life." "Is he afraid of death?" Sablefiend Scorpio was surprised. Tan Xiao didn't answer Sable-Fiend Scorpio's question, but he was well aware that his previous perception of Sable-Fiend Scorpio's caution was completely wrong. He wasn't being cautious at all, he was being greedy for life and afraid of death. If he had known that he was like this, not only would he not have accepted him as a disciple, he would have killed him instead. Time flew by. For 3 days, Argent Marshal Hale enjoyed the service of 2 immortal prostitutes in the private room opposite. His performance was completely befuddled. Swish. A lightning-like figure silently entered the private room where Tan Xiao was sitting. In the private room, in addition to Tan Xiao, there was also a sleeping prostitute in the gold core stage. How's the arrangement? Tan Xiao noticed Sable-Fiend Scorpio's return, and immediately asked. A smile appeared on the corner of Sable-Fiend Scorpio's mouth and she said, "Everything is arranged, master. However, I paid the price of 800,000 immortal crystals." Tan Xiao lightly said, "Immortal crystals are meant to be spent. As long as we can achieve our goal, let alone paying 800,000 immortal crystals, even 8 million immortal crystals or 80 million immortal crystals are worth it." This subordinate understands. Sable-Fiend Scorpio nodded. Finally, on the 4th day after Tan Xiao and Sable-Fiend Scorpio waited, Argent Marshal Hale came out of the private room with the 2 immortal prostitutes in his arms, and went to the hall on the 1st floor. Only then did he reluctantly let go of the 2 immortal prostitutes and walked outside. Boom! The crisp sound of a gong suddenly sounded. A middle-aged woman with a swaying fat body and heavy makeup came to the hall surrounded by dozens of girls. After attracting the attention of hundreds of people in the hall, she smilingly said, "Honorable guests, you're really blessed. We just had a beautiful immortal prostitute here, and I can tell everyone that this immortal prostitute is still a virgin. However, we'll play a new trick today. This immortal prostitute won't stay in the live plume mansion, but will be auctioned here instead. Any honorable guests who want to win this beauty can bid for it later." In the crowd, Argent Marshal Hale looked surprised because he rarely saw such a good auction in the live plume mansion. After hesitating for a moment, he went straight to a chair and sat down. "Invite Jing Xiener." The fat woman waved the handkerchief in her hand and called out loudly. Immediately, a young woman with a graceful figure and a white veil over her face slowly walked down the stairs. A faintly discernible fragrance wafted out of her body and immediately shook the spirits of hundreds of guests in the hall. Pairs of hungry wolf-like eyes constantly lingered on the sensitive parts of her body. Argent Marshal Hale was powerful and his eyes were extremely sharp. When he saw Jing Xiener's appearance through the white veil, he suddenly felt his lower abdomen heat up, and a greedy look appeared in his eyes. A beauty! A peerless stunner! Argent Marshal Hale, who had seen countless women, instantly made up his mind to bid for this peerless stunner, no matter how much he had to pay. Otherwise, he believed that he would regret it for a long time. The fat woman smilingly said, "Jing Xiener is still a virgin, but she's been trained by our live plume mansion for many years. She'll definitely be a first-class expert when she serves men in the future. Whoever manages to win her will definitely be able to experience the best pleasure of being a man. I'll cut to the chase. Please take off your veil, Jing Xiener, and let everyone witness your glory." The next moment, under the watchful eyes of countless people, Jing Xiener raised her slender fingers and took off the veil on her face. Then, she gently bowed to everyone and softly said, "Xiener greets all the distinguished guests. No matter which esteemed guest buys Xiener, please treat Xiener well. Xiener will definitely do her best to serve the future master comfortably." Boom! The scene in the hall exploded in an instant. Countless cries of surprise rang out one after another. Heavens! This is the first time I've seen such a beautiful fairy. Even the most popular immortal prostitute of the live plume mansion can't be compared with her, right? She's so beautiful. She's the most beautiful goddess in my mind. What the hell am I seeing? How can there be such a beautiful woman in this world? The sun, moon, and stars seem to be overshadowed in front of her. No way. My heart's beating so fast. I must have her. Let alone having her, I'm willing to live 100 years less if I can get intimate with her. She's really worthy of being a fairy. All the women I've seen before are simply trash. Get her. I must get her. I'm willing to sell my natal immortal sword for her. Argent Marshal Hale's eyes were fixated on Jing Xian, and his body slightly trembled. He had seen many stunningly beautiful women, but those who could be compared to Jing Xian, in front of him could be counted on one hand. It was breathtakingly beautiful and breathtakingly beautiful. At this moment, Argent Marshal Hale's heart was completely captivated by Jing Xian. Even if I have to go bankrupt, even if I have to pay a bigger price, I must buy her. It's really hard to come across such a superb woman in my life. Argent Marshal Hale took a deep breath and looked at the obese woman, saying aloud, "Now that this belle has revealed her true face, can we start the bidding?" On the 6th floor, standing in the corridor, Tan Xiu watched Argent Marshal Hale's expression in the hall below and secretly sneered inwardly. He then turned his head and said, "We can lend him some money if he doesn't have enough money. Judging from his appearance, I'm afraid he's ready to go all out." A contemptuous look flashed in Sable Fiend Scorpio's eyes as she said, "His nature is no good. He naturally can't resist the temptation of beauty." "I really admire you, Sable Fiend Scorpio." Tan Xiu lightly smiled and said, "I didn't expect you to find such a stunning stunner in such a short time." A smile outlined on the corner of Sable Fiend Scorpio's mouth as she asked, "If Master likes her, you can take her after this show is over. It's just that her identity is a bit complicated, but it's not too troublesome for me." "No, no, no." Tan Xiu hurriedly waved his hand. "Don't drag me into this. Those at home's cough cough. I'm still having a headache now." The smile on Sable Fiend Scorpio's face turned thicker and she said, "Master, it's normal for powerhouses to have 3 wives and 4 concubines. It's normal even if they have countless beauties at the same time. You're the best peerless genius I've ever seen. No matter how many peerless beauties there are, they're all worthy of following you. Forget it." Tan Xiu shook his head. "My goal is to become stronger, so I really don't want to be entangled with women. Alright, go and arrange some people. This time, I must screw him up. Not only will I make him lose both his money and reputation, but I'll also make him die in anger and regret." "Understood." Sable Fiend Scorpio put away her smile and silently disappeared into the corridor. In the hall on the 1st floor, the obese woman watched Argent Marshal Hale's performance and secretly sneered inwardly. She naturally knew that this auction was a trap aimed at Argent Marshal Hale. Seeing how cooperative he was, she smilingly said, "Since that distinguished guest can't wait any longer, I'm sure you've prepared a lot of money, yes? I don't dare to waste everyone's time, so I'll now announce that the starting bid for Jing Xian is 1 million crystal essences. If you want to participate in the auction, each bid must be at least 500,000 crystal essences." Hiss! The hundreds of distinguished guests in the hall gasped upon hearing this. They could afford it if it was 1 million immortal crystals, but 1 million crystal essences was 100 million immortal crystals. Such a huge number could simply drive people crazy. 5 million crystal essences. Just as the obese woman's voice faded away, an oily middle-aged man in the crowd raised his hand and shouted, "Only I can match such a beauty. 5 million crystal essences, and this peerless stunner will be mine in the future." "Nonsense. I bid 2 million crystal essences. This daddy may not have many things, but I do have a lot of money." Another young man sneered and directly bid 5 million. 3 million. As the two kept bidding, Jing Xian's bidding price soared all the way to 5 million crystal essences before it stopped. Chapter 1344. Argent Marshal Hale noticed that the young man no longer increased the price. Just as the fat woman was about to speak, he swiftly raised his hand and said in a deep voice, 8 million crystal essences. The oily middle-aged man suddenly turned around and glared at Argent Marshal Hale, angrily shouting, 10 million crystal essences. I bid 10 million crystal essences. I'll give up if anyone bids higher than me. Hiss! The hundreds of guests in the hall, including the female prostitutes and immortal prostitutes, gasped one after another. Disbelief flashed in their eyes. They never dreamed that someone would be willing to spend 10 million crystal essences for a woman. Argent Marshal Hale sneered coldly. He wouldn't have been able to take out 10 million crystal essences before he went to the secret palace. But he had wandered in the secret palace for a long time and obtained a lot of treasures worth far more than 10 million crystal essences. Hence, he shouted in a deep voice, 5 million crystal essences. This master has plenty of wealth. Only a bigwig like this master is qualified to have such a top-notch stunner. In a flash, the entire hall was dead silent. It was as if they could hear the sound of a pin dropping on the ground. Suddenly, an ordinary-looking, thin middle-aged man shouted in a deep voice, I bid 20 million crystal essences. I want to see how amazing this man is to dare to call himself a master under the watchful eyes of so many people. I'll scare you to death if you want to compete in wealth. Such a stunning stunner isn't something some poor people can have. Fuck. Argent Marshal Hale's self-esteem was severely provoked. His murderous eyes swept over the middle-aged man again and again. He panted a few times and fiercely shouted, 30 million crystal essences. This father bids 30 million crystal essences. Do you have the ability to be so arrogant? Do you want to increase the price? A hesitant look appeared on the thin middle-aged man's face. He was silent for a quarter of an hour before he stammered. 35 million. I'm willing to bid 35 million crystal essences to buy that stunning stunner. If anyone bids higher than me, 35 million. Everyone present was deeply stimulated by this terrifying number. In their eyes, 35 million crystal essences was an astronomical sum. Argent Marshal Hale was about to explode with rage. He never dreamed that someone would dare to pay such a terrifying price for an immortal prostitute. Most importantly, the other party kept provoking him. He was humiliated like a dog under the everlasting palace. Now that he had left the everlasting palace, there were actually people who wanted to make things difficult for him. This made him feel even worse and angrier than stabbing him with a knife. 40 million crystal essences. These words of his were completely squeezed out from the gaps between his teeth. He didn't have that many crystal essences, but he still had a lot of immortal treasures. If he sold all his immortal treasures, he should barely be able to gather 40 million crystal essences. The middle-aged man felt as if he had been struck by lightning. He sat down in a daze and did not speak for a long time. The obese woman was also excited by Argent Marshal Hale's bid, but she knew very well that this terrifying sum didn't belong to her. She took a deep breath and said loudly, May I know your name, honored guest? Argent Marshal Hale. Argent Marshal Hale spat out these words and immediately felt relieved. But then, a trace of regret bloomed inside him. After thinking about it seriously for a while, he realized that he had been too rash, because 40 million crystal essences was definitely a terrifying amount, and he had actually used it to buy a woman, even if she was a stunningly beautiful woman. No, it wasn't worth it. Sir Argent Marshal Hale, please pay now. Jingxian, or will be your personal property after you pay the crystal essences, said the obese woman with a smile. Argent Marshal Hale was silent for a moment and slowly said, I don't have enough crystal essences with me, but I do have a lot of immortal treasures that I can use to exchange for crystal essences. Please ask your acceptance officer to come here. I need him to evaluate the price. The obese woman's expression suddenly turned cold. She made a few gestures and more than a dozen powerful experts silently appeared in the surroundings. Immediately after, she sneered and said, What kind of place is this? Do you think there's an acceptance officer here? Honored guest, just say it directly if you can't afford it. Don't make fun of us. Of course, those who make fun of us won't have a good end. You should have heard who's backing us. Argent Marshal Hale was furious, but under the watchful eyes of countless people, he finally said with a headache, It's a well-known fact that immortal treasures can be used as collateral. I can definitely afford it if I can use them as collateral. I'm sorry. The obese woman shook her head. At this time, the young man who participated in the previous bidding suddenly said, I can buy your immortal treasures, but the price will be lower than those in other shops. Argent Marshal Hale couldn't afford to sell his immortal treasures at the moment, so he was immediately happy after hearing the young man's words. He quickly took out an interspatial ring and threw it to the young man, saying, "Come and check them and give me the price." The young man took the interspatial ring and sent his spiritual sense inside. After carefully looking at it for a long time, he slowly said, 16 million crystal essences. We can trade now if you're willing to sell them. I'll leave if you don't. You're looting a burning house. Argent Marshal Hale angrily retorted. I've actually evaluated the total value of these immortal treasures. They can be sold for at least 24 million. You're only willing to offer 16 million? Isn't this too much of a scam? You overestimated the total value of your immortal treasures. The young man sneered. 16 million. You can sell them if you want, but forget it if you don't. I helped you out of kindness, yet you don't appreciate it. You're really infuriating. Argent Marshal Hale's face turned pale after being reprimanded. He finally gritted his teeth and said, Fine. You said 16 million, so 16 million it is. I still have two things here. One is a defensive immortal artifact, and the other is an offensive one. Their total value is more than 10 million. The young man took the two items and carefully judged them. Then he expressionlessly said, 8 million crystal essences. If you're willing to sell them, then sell them. If you don't want to, then consider it as we never talked before. You buy your peerless stunner, and I'll just watch the fun. Too ruthless. Argent Marshal Hale's heart was bleeding, but he was really afraid that the young man wouldn't buy his immortal treasures. Finally, he nodded helplessly and said, All right. Since you're willing to buy them, then let's trade now. A total of 240 billion crystal essences. The young man nodded and took out an interspatial ring. He threw it to him and said, There are 240 billion crystal essences inside. These immortal treasures of yours are mine from now on. No problem, said Argent Marshal Hale bitterly. Quickly. He paid 40 million crystal essences to the obese woman. When the obese woman brought Jing Xian, to Argent Marshal Hale's side, Argent Marshal Hale still had the impulse to slap her despite her unparalleled beauty. One must know that apart from his origin immortal sword, he had sold all of his possessions. After paying 40 million crystal essences for Jing Xian, he only had 7 million left. Follow me. Under the watchful eyes of countless people, Argent Marshal Hale left with Jing Xian. After a while, Sablefiend Scorpio saw the obese woman and the young man in a secret chamber. Whether it was crystal essences or immortal treasures, she took them all and gave them 800,000 immortal crystals. Then, she gave each of them 10,000 crystal essences and quickly left. Tanxiu quietly followed behind Argent Marshal Hale and Jing Xian. At this moment, Argent Marshal Hale's aura was a bit chaotic, and his mood was obviously very unstable. Therefore, he was more confident that he wouldn't be exposed. In a residential area of Floating Snow City, when Jing Xian followed Argent Marshal Hale into a deep alley, she suddenly stopped and a pitiful look appeared on her stunning face. What's wrong? Argent Marshal Hale, who was still unhappy inside, turned around and asked with a sullen face when he noticed that Jing Xian had stopped. Jing Xian hesitated for a moment, and her face gradually turned a bit red. Then she shyly said, Master, I want to pay my respects. Pay my respects? Argent Marshal Hale stared blankly for a moment. Looking at Jing Xian's blushing expression, his bad mood calmed down a lot, and he said in a deep voice, Endure it first. We're almost at my house. Jing Xian didn't lift her leg and looked like she was about to burst into tears. Then she pleaded, Master, I really can't hold it anymore. You're really troublesome. Argent Marshal Hale grumbled in dissatisfaction. He waved his hand and said, The ceremonial pool is just around the corner ahead. Let's go. All right. Jing Xian deliberately looked pleasantly surprised and followed Argent Marshal Hale to the ceremonial pool. Then she covered her lower abdomen and strode inside. Argent Marshal Hale didn't follow her and leaned against the wall instead. He silently pondered where he could get a lot of wealth. 10,000 meters away, Jing Xian's figure appeared out of thin air. When she saw Tanxiu's appearance, she slowly came to Tanxiu and respectfully asked, Are you Great Tang Heavenly Emperor? That's right. It's me. Tan Xiao nodded. I've completed the mission. That Argent Martial Hale should be thinking that I'm leaving the Gong Pool. Jing Xian smilingly said. Well done. Tan Xiao said with a satisfied smile. This grade 7 immortal artifact is your reward. Alright, you can leave now. But let me give you a piece of advice. Snowfall City isn't a good place to stay. You'd better go somewhere else. Jing Xian took the 7th grade immortal artifact and threw it into her interspatial ring without looking at it. Then, she said with a smile, Great Tang Heavenly Emperor, Grandma told me that she'll take me away from this immortal domain. She also promised me that if I performed well, she would accept me as her disciple. So I'll go wherever you go in the future. What? Tan Xiao never expected that Sable Fiend Scorpio would give Jing Xian such a promise. Swoosh! Sable Fiend Scorpio's figure came from a distance and appeared in front of Tan Xiao and Jing Xian in an instant. She looked at Tan Xiao and respectfully said, Master, Jing Xian is the daughter of an old friend of mine. I want to accept her as my disciple. I hope you can allow it. Chapter 1345. Tan Xiao's indifferent eyes swept over Sable Fiend Scorpio and immediately said, I don't care about your personal affairs, but don't cause trouble for me. You should be well aware that I have a lot of things to deal with. What kind of punishment will you suffer if you cause me trouble? This subordinate understands. Sable Fiend Scorpio hurriedly bowed her head and replied. Tan Xiao nodded and said, Argent Martial Hale should be aware of the problem now. Prepare for the next plan. Jing Xian stood beside the two of them. Her pair of beautiful eyes had been replaced by a look of shock. She never dreamed that Sable Fiend Scorpio, a super powerhouse she somewhat admired, would address this mysterious young man as master. She had heard stories about Sable Fiend Scorpio countless times since she was a child. Every time she heard of a thrilling moment, she would be overwhelmed with emotions and wish she could take her place. She would go through great storms and waves, tread on the line of life and death, and constantly fight for the chance to survive and become stronger. Who is he? Is he stronger than Sable Fiend Scorpio? Jing Xian was a bit curious about Tan Xiao and made up her mind to find out about it when she had the opportunity. Of course, she was still very confident in herself. As long as the other party was a man, she was sure that she could make him dizzy and disoriented, wishing to dig out his heart and show it to her. You enter the Heavenly Abode artifact. But remember, don't disturb the healing of the 2 perfected golden immortals inside. Tan Xiao looked at the somewhat absent-minded Jing Xian, and said in a deep voice. Understood. Jing Xian found that Sable Fiend Scorpio had gone far away, so she could only follow Tan Xiao's order and enter the Heavenly Abode artifact. However, the moment she entered the Heavenly Abode, her body suddenly shook. What did he say? Don't disturb the healing of the 2 perfected golden immortals inside? There are actually 2 other perfected golden immortals inside this Heavenly Abode artifact? The shock in Jing Xian's heart had reached a point that was hard to be repeated. In the past, it wasn't difficult for her to meet perfected golden immortals given her qualifications. After all, her father was a perfected golden immortal. What shocked her was that this mysterious young man had 3 perfected golden immortals besides Sable Fiend Scorpio as his subordinates. Could it be he's a supreme? The outside world. Tan Xiao turned into a wisp of green smoke and instantly disappeared. The next moment, his figure reappeared in an alley only 200 meters away from Argent Martial Hale. A shoemaker was knocked unconscious by Tan Xiao in an instant. After stuffing an immortal crystal into his arms, he stuffed him into the Heavenly Abode artifact and occupied his position. Repairing shoes. The deep voice echoed in the alley, outside the ceremonial pool. Argent Martial Hale waited for a long time, but Jing Xian didn't come out. He suddenly frowned slightly. After pondering for a moment, he instantly released his spiritual sense and shrouded the Qigong pool. What made his expression change was that there was no one in the Qigong pool. Where was Jing Xian's shadow? Where is he? Argent Martial Hale's spiritual sense crazily soared and enveloped hundreds of kilometers in an instant. But what made him furious was that he couldn't find Jing Xian's shadow within hundreds of kilometers. She ran away? Argent Marshal Hale's facial muscles twitched. A thick murderous aura seemed to have materialized and spread in all directions. The bad premonition in his heart grew stronger and stronger. He finally realized that he seemed to have fallen into a trap set up by someone. His money was gone and his people were gone. He simply lost both his money and his people. Along with the murderous aura and spiritual sense released by Argent Marshal Hale, angry roars came from every corner within hundreds of kilometers. Among them, 2 terrifying spiritual senses directly bombarded Argent Marshal Hale's spiritual sense, causing him to howl miserably and withdraw all the spiritual sense he released. Whoosh, 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 more than a dozen figures flickered lightning fast and appeared around Argent Marshal Hale, surrounding him. One of them, a golden-robed old man, looked as though he could spit out fire from his eyes. He glared at Argent Marshal Hale with murderous intent and roared, "Damn bastard! You dare to release your spiritual sense to peep in Floating Snow City? You deserve to die." "Everyone, it's a misunderstanding." Argent Marshal Hale also realized that he had acted rashly just now. In some big cities in the Immortal domains, rashly releasing one's spiritual sense to look for others would definitely offend everyone within the range of one's spiritual sense. It was a serious provocation. He was so angry that he lost his mind and finally acted rashly, thus attracting more than a dozen golden immortals and perfected golden immortals. The golden-robed old man was also very angry. He just forgot to activate the spirit isolating array in his residence, so the scene of him and his woman duel cultivating had been clearly seen by this damn peeping Tom. It didn't matter if he was seen, but it was absolutely unforgivable for his woman to be seen. "Everyone, this damn bastard dares to provoke us and peep at our privacy. Let's attack together and kill him," shouted the golden-robed old man. "Kill." More than a dozen people unleashed their immortal weapons. Argent Marshal Hale's complexion changed and he fiercely shouted, "I'm Argent Marshal Hale, a subordinate of the Everlasting Palace's venerable Cambrian. You dare to kill me? Aren't you afraid that my Everlasting Palace will retaliate against you?" The Everlasting Palace. The Golden Immortals and perfected Golden Immortals' complexions changed, and fear immediately appeared on their faces. The golden-robed old man was shaken inwardly, and his killing intent instantly dissipated. He squeezed out a smile on his face and cupped his fists. "Ah, it turns out to be an immortal friend from the Everlasting Palace. I was wondering why someone dared to use their spiritual sense in Floating Snow City. Anyway, fellow immortal Argent Marshal Hale was chasing an enemy, right? Please forgive us for not knowing it beforehand, fellow immortal Argent Marshal Hale." Argent Marshal Hale secretly sneered inwardly, but he maintained a calm expression on the surface and said, "You can't be blamed for not knowing it beforehand. Quickly retreat and don't meddle in our Everlasting Palace's affairs." "Understood." The dozen people secretly heaved a sigh of relief after hearing his words. It wasn't that they couldn't kill Argent Marshal Hale, but they didn't want to provoke trouble. Since they could directly resolve the conflict, they excused themselves and left. In the blink of an eye, only Argent Marshal Hale was left in the alley. "Who exactly is this Jingxianer? Who set up this trap to trap me?" Argent Marshal Hale's eyes flickered as he pondered over the whole matter. He finally realized that the person who set up this trap was definitely that fat woman from the Live Plume Mansion, as well as the young man who bought a lot of immortal treasures from him. As he thought up to here, Argent Marshal Hale immediately rushed back to the Live Plume Mansion. When he stormed through the gate and saw the bustling scene inside, he was immediately enraged. A huge aura erupted from his body, causing a large number of guests and prostitutes to flee in panic. He then shouted fiercely, "That fat woman who presided over Jingxianer's auction and that bastard who cheated me of my immortal artifact. Get the hell out here." Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. More than a dozen figures flickered lightning fast and appeared inside the hall. As they locked on Argent Marshal Hale, a burly man strode down the stairs and shouted, "I remember your name, Argent Marshal Hale. You dare to come to my Live Plume Mansion and cause trouble? Are you tired of living? Your Live Plume Mansion actually set up a trap to trap me." Argent Marshal Hale angrily yelled, "Hand over that damn fat woman, and that bastard who cheated me of my immortal treasures." else don't blame me for being impolite. The burly man unleashed his immortal weapon and coldly said, "You got guts. You dare to provoke my live plume mansion? You're not allowed to step out of the gate until you pay the price. Activate the array and let him know that our live plume mansion isn't some clown that can provoke us." Immediately, a layer of water ripples appeared out of thin air with the hall as the center and spread out in all directions. In the blink of an eye, it had spread throughout the hall and eventually formed a transparent energy shield. Inside the array, the burly man and more than a dozen guards of the live plume mansion glared at Argent Marshal Hale with seething killing intent. "I've long heard that the live plume mansion's background isn't simple, but I want to see how capable you are. I forgot to tell you that I'm from the Everlasting Palace. I'll deal with you first and then make your behind-the-scenes master apologize to me," shouted Argent Marshal Hale fiercely. "The Everlasting Palace?" A look of dread flashed in the eyes of the burly man, but then he seemed to recall something and sneered. "So what if you're from the Everlasting Palace? The behind-the-scenes master of our live plume mansion won't be afraid of you. Kill them." In the depths of the live plume mansion, inside a magnificent palace, there were 4 long tables placed on both sides. Delicacies and bejeweled nectar filled each table. Wandering Slayer, clad in a red robe, sat cross-legged behind the long table. He looked at the 4 distinguished guests and smilingly said, "The 4 of you bravely rushed into the secret palace. Although you didn't get the inheritance of drunken Immortal Supreme, you must have had a great harvest, no?" Behind the first long table on the left, Old Freak Goldenray grinned and said, "It was indeed a great harvest. Drunken Immortal Supreme is indeed worthy of being the richest Supreme 80,000 years ago. Good things can be seen everywhere in the secret palace. It's a pity that we didn't get the flowing light wings you wanted, Wandering Slayer. It's really shameful." "It doesn't matter," said Wandering Slayer with a faint smile. "I also found out from the historical records that the flowing light wings were obtained by Drunken Immortal Supreme 80,000 years ago. I'm not sure whether he put it in the secret palace or not. So it's fine if you didn't get it. Come, for old friends, let's drink." "Come." The 4 were open-minded people and didn't care much about it even though they didn't complete Wandering Slayer's task. They could just keep it in their hearts and hand it over to Wandering Slayer if they happened to get it later. After drinking a cup of wine, the 5 of them wore strange expressions at the same time and looked at the front of the live plume mansion. In an instant, the 5 people's spiritual senses enveloped the palace hall in front of them. Even though there was an array blocking it, their spiritual senses could easily penetrate it and clearly see the scene inside. The 3rd watch is over. Seeking recommendation votes. Chapter 1346. Goldenray Old Freak slapped the long table and grinned. "Venerable Wandering Slayer, you're the strongest perfected golden immortal in the floating snow city. Yet others don't fear you at all. Those dozen brats are the guards of your live plume mansion, aren't they? TSK, they're really miserable." The smile on Venerable Wandering Slayer's face faded away like a tide and was replaced by anger. He couldn't wait to slap that troublemaker to death, and he couldn't wait to slaughter his dozens of useless subordinates. It must be noted that his 4 old friends came to visit him again after nearly 800 years, yet he didn't expect that they would encounter such a shameful thing. He took a deep breath and said in a deep voice, "Old friends, I've let you see a joke. I'm going to kill that brat, and then have a few drinks with you." Goldenray Old Freak quickly raised his hand and said, "Please don't be anxious, Venerable Wandering Slayer. Don't you see who that troublemaker is?" Venerable Wandering Slayer stared blankly for a moment before his brows furrowed deeply, and a look of disgust appeared in his eyes. He forced a smile and said, It turns out to be that traitor of the Rosefinch holy sect. Star Cultivation Great Emperor is wise and mighty, and the 5 of us once paid a visit to him and received some pointers from him. I never expected that this disciple of his would turn out to be such a treacherous coward. He really ruined the great reputation of Star Cultivation Great Emperor. This brat deserves to die." Goldenray Old Freak shook his head and said, "I know he deserves to die, but he's now a member of the Everlasting Palace. Don't forget that we've all suffered losses in the hands of the Everlasting Palace. I'm afraid the Everlasting Palace won't let this matter go if you kill that brat now. He came to my place to make trouble, yet I'm not going to let him bully me just because he's a member of the Everlasting Palace," said Venerable Wandering Slayer coldly. Old Freak Goldenray raised his hand and rubbed his chin. With a sinister smile he said, "I feel that killing that brat is letting him off too lightly. Since we old friends are here, why don't we humiliate that brat and the Everlasting Palace? This time, no matter what, it was that kid who came to your territory to cause trouble. We are in the right." Another handsome and scholarly Venerable Living Willow sneered and said, "Rumor has it that the Everlasting Palace suffered heavy losses during the Immortal Fate Hunt in the Secret Palace. They lost more than a dozen perfected Golden Immortals, and even more Golden Immortals. Let's add fuel to the fire, and make them feel like they're sitting on pins and needles. Their infamy will spread far and wide." Although the other two did not speak, they nodded in agreement. Venerable Wandering Slayer grinned fiendishly. He slapped the long table and laughed aloud. "Well, since the four of you are in such a good mood, then let's do it. Ruthlessly humiliate that traitor, and at the same time, let Everlasting Palace's reputation suffer some damage." Immediately after, the five figures disappeared into thin air. When they reappeared, they were already in the hall of the palace. In almost the blink of an eye, the five people appeared in front of Argent Marshal Hale. "I've said it before, hand over those two bastards. Otherwise, even if your live plume mansion has a great background, I'll still dare to burn this place down." After Argent Marshal Hale severely injured more than a dozen live plume mansion's guards, a crazed look appeared on his face and he roared aggressively. Venerable Wandering Slayer narrowed his eyes and sneered. "Is my live plume mansion a place where a traitor who deceives his master and exterminates his ancestors can behave atrociously? Burn it down? Today, I'll let you know how miserable the price of arrogance is." With that said, a big golden seal floated out of his palm and fiercely bombarded Argent Marshal Hale. In a flash, the golden seal that had expanded dozens of times hit Argent Marshal Hale's chest. He crazily spurted out blood, and was sent flying upside down toward the direction where Goldenray Old Freak was. Cutting technique. Goldenray Old Freak crazily laughed and released golden threads from his fingers, which instantly turned into a spiral killer move. However, he controlled it very well and only crushed Argent Marshal Hale's hands when he was caught off guard. Then he kicked Argent Marshal Hale's back and sent him flying toward Venerable Living Willow. Venerable Living Willow let out a bashful smile, and even winked at Argent Marshal Hale. Amidst his playful expression, an invisible palm fiercely slapped Argent Marshal Hale's face. Thousands of slaps made Argent Marshal Hale scream incessantly. Then, the palm slammed on his chest and sent him flying toward Immortal Master Nightbright in another direction. Good timing. Immortal Master Nightbright unleashed a light sphere, and directly bombarded Argent Marshal Hale's back. The strike alone caused Argent Marshal Hale to suffer extremely serious internal injuries. Then he controlled his strength and sent Argent Marshal Hale flying toward Venerable Netherflame. Netherflame Immortal Venerable licked his lips, and a mass of annihilation flame instantly shrouded Argent Marshal Hale. In nearly a flash, Argent Marshal Hale's hair was burned clean, and even his immortal robe was burned to ashes. Bam! Argent Marshal Hale's body heavily slammed on the ground between the five people. At this moment, Argent Marshal Hale had never felt so close to the ground. At least he didn't have to suffer the attacks of five terrifying powerhouses. "Who the hell are you?" Argent Marshal Hale spurted out a mouthful of blood. He took out a robe from his interspatial ring, and wrapped it around his body in a sorry state as he furiously roared. He was scared because he never dreamed that there were so many powerhouses in the live plume mansion. Given his current strength, even an early-stage perfected Golden Immortal would find it very difficult to defeat him. Yet he didn't even have the strength to fight back in front of these five people. Therefore, these five people were at least late-stage perfected Golden Immortals. "Who are we?" Venerable Wandering Slayer sneered. "We're naturally from the live plume mansion. But you, a shameless traitor who betrayed the Rosefinch Holy Sect and smeared Star Cultivation Great Emperor's face. You really deserve to die. However, killing you so easily would be letting you off too easily. For my master, for star cultivation great emperor, you set up a trap here to kill me? Argent Marshal Hale roared. A strange look flashed in Venerable Wandering Slayer's eyes. He turned to look at his severely injured subordinate and asked in a deep voice, "What's going on here?" The seriously injured burly man wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and respectfully said, "Master, someone gave us 500,000 crystal essences and wanted to borrow our place to auction an immortal prostitute." The steward agreed, thinking that auctioning an immortal prostitute would make our place livelier. Later on, the other party auctioned an immortal prostitute in this hall, and Argent Marshal Hale finally won her at a high price. Afterward, Argent Marshal Hale left with the immortal prostitute, and the lively scene came to an end. Who would have thought that he would come back in less than half a day, saying that our live plume mansion cheated him, and wanted us to hand over the person? Venerable Wandering Slayer frowned and asked in a deep voice, "Who are they?" "We don't know who they are." The burly man shook his head and said, "Our lithe plume mansion just provides a place and receives some benefits. The rest has nothing to do with us." Venerable Wandering Slayer's expression turned cold. Just as he was about to speak, Goldenray Old Freak laughed and sighed. "Who set this trap? To think that even you, Venerable Wandering Slayer, got involved in it. But this Argent Marshal Hale is really unlucky. He lost both his money and his life. Huh. Star Cultivation Great Emperor once accepted him as a disciple. I thought he was powerful and smart, but it turns out that he's just a stupid pervert." Venerable Wandering Slayer shook his head with a wry smile and sighed. The other party really schemed well. But that auction was one where one party was willing to fight and the other party was willing to suffer. What the fuck does it have to do with my live plume mansion? This brat actually came to my place to cause trouble. He's just trying to make things difficult for me. Go and inform the Everlasting Palace's people. Ask them if they still care about this brat. We'll kill him if they don't. Understood. The burly man cupped his fists and quickly left the array. Floating Snow City, the residence of the Everlasting Palace's members. With his hands behind his back, Venerable Cambrian quietly stood by the window of a 100-meter-high pavilion with killing intent surging around him. The losses suffered this time were too great for the Everlasting Palace. It was the first time in tens of thousands of years that the Everlasting Palace suffered such a heavy blow. The strength of the entire sect had plummeted by nearly half. If it weren't for the two supremes in the sect, the entire sect's strength would have been inferior to that of a second-rate sect. "What should we do now, Marshal Uncle?" Behind Venerable Cambrian, a coquettish woman furrowed her brows and asked, "We must make up for such a big loss elsewhere." Venerable Cambrian coldly snorted. Some disciples of the sect came out alive from the secret palace this time, and the number of treasures and other resources they brought with them is also not small. Send a message to the disciples of other immortal domains in the immortal world. Once they find Dao Master Qingfeng and undemonized Sovereign Mo, they must immediately kill them. Understood, I'll send the message right away. The coquettish woman respectfully replied. Venerable Cambrian was silent for a long time. After the coquettish woman sent the message, he faintly sighed and said, "I'm afraid that the sect's disciples have some resentment in their hearts now. Other forces that are not friendly to our everlasting palace are now waiting to hit us while we're down. We need to make an example out of them to deter those who are ready to make trouble." Whoosh! A message token came from a distance and was instantly caught by Venerable Cambrian. When he read the contents of the message token, his complexion suddenly changed. His killing intent skyrocketed and he shouted, "Sky Crystal, Tianhen, come with me to the Lithe Plume Mansion." A quarter of an hour later, Venerable Cambrian appeared in the Lithe Plume Mansion with the two perfected golden immortals, Sky Crystal and Tianhen. When the three of them entered the array in the hall and saw the people inside, their complexion drastically changed. Venerable Wandering Slayer, Golden Light Old Freak, Venerable Living Willow, Celestial Master Night Bright, and Venerable Netherfire. I didn't expect to meet you here. As the saying goes, if you want to beat a dog, you need to look at its owner first. The five of you are really arrogant. You even dared to kill the people of my everlasting palace. Venerable Cambrian unleashed his natal immortal sword. After looking at the 5 people, he shouted with surging killing intent. Chapter 1347. Venerable Wandering Slayer showed a disdainful look. This venerable Cambrian in front of him was once defeated by him, and was nearly killed by his sword. He didn't expect that he would be so arrogant again. The dog raised by your everlasting palace bites people everywhere. Don't tell me you want to rely on your everlasting palace's prestige to bully others? What do you mean? Asked Venerable Cambrian coldly. Do you know where this place is? Sneered Venerable Wandering Slayer. This is my Live Plume Mansion's territory. Your people came here to make trouble. Do you think I should show my face to him? Venerable Cambrian frowned, and turned to look at the miserable Argent Marshal Hale. Then he shouted in a deep voice. Tell me what's going on here? Argent Marshal Hale's voice was a bit hoarse. Someone colluded with the Live Plume Mansion to plot against me. I came here to demand an explanation. Yet they trapped me in the array and tried to kill me. Slander, Venerable Wandering Slayer angrily shouted. But at this moment his expression slightly changed and he shouted. Who is it? Get the hell out! Whoosh! 2 ghostly figures appeared inside the array out of thin air. After appearing with Sablefiend Scorpio, Tanshio looked at the miserable Argent Marshal Hale, and immediately grinned. I was just passing by Floating Snow City, and didn't expect such an interesting thing to happen here, so I came to join in the fun. What's your name again? Why do I find you so familiar? What's your name? Wandering Slayer. Venerable Wandering Slayer's face turned cold and he coldly replied. This immortal is the master of this Live Plume Mansion, Venerable Wandering Slayer. Who are you, mister? I think you're not just here to watch the fun, no? I'm telling the truth. Tanshio grinned and said. It's just a coincidence that I came here. Venerable Wandering Slayer? I remember now. There was once a great person who mentioned you to me. Who was it? Asked Venerable Wandering Slayer with narrowed eyes. Star Cultivation Great Emperor, replied Tanshio via voice transmission. Venerable Wandering Slayer's expression slightly changed. He took a deep breath and slowly asked, Who are you, mister? I'm Great Tang Heavenly Emperor, answered Tanshio with a smile. Great Tang Heavenly Emperor? Everyone present was shocked. The Great Tang Heavenly Emperor, who had been the talk of the town recently, was actually this young man in front of them? One must know that the most famous people in Drunken Immortal Supreme's secret palace were the peerless geniuses who had passed the bridge test, and one of them was the Great Tang Heavenly Emperor. Great Tang Heavenly Emperor, why are you here? Venerable Wandering Slayer asked in puzzlement. Tanshio let out a hollow laugh and said, I didn't manage to grab that fortuitous encounter, so I was naturally driven out by Drunken Immortal Supreme's inheritor. Although he wanted to kill some people to establish his prestige, these 5 were late-stage perfected golden immortals, and were very difficult to deal with. If he were to shed all pretense of cordiality with them, it would definitely be a big threat to the everlasting palace. His eyes shifted to Argent Marshal Hale and coldly said, Can you show me some evidence that these 5 people set you up? Argent Marshal Hale hesitated. Although the incident happened here, he realized that the one who set him up probably had nothing to do with Venerable Wandering Slayer's group through the conversation between Venerable Wandering Slayer and the burly man. However, Venerable Cambrian understood from Argent Marshal Hale's hesitation. The immortal sword in his hand pierced Argent Marshal Hale's chest. The next moment, the immortal sword circled back to Argent Marshal Hale's neck and directly cut off his head. Furthermore, he instantly grabbed Argent Marshal Hale's immortal soul that escaped from his corpse and fiercely said, You deserve death for inviting disaster to my everlasting palace. Puff, Venerable Cambrian grabbed Argent Marshal Hale's immortal soul, and indifferently looked at Venerable Wandering Slayer, saying, He provoked you, so I'll definitely give you an explanation. But how about it? Just as Venerable Wandering Slayer was about to speak, he suddenly heard a voice transmission. His eyes slightly narrowed and he suppressed the words he was about to say. He took a deep breath and said, "That's a good explanation indeed. But I want to make a deal with Venerable Cambrian. How about it?" "What deal?" asked Venerable Cambrian indifferently. "Argent Marshal Hale may have been punished, but I haven't vented my hatred yet," said Venerable Wandering Slayer. "I'm willing to pay 2 million crystal essences to buy his immortal soul. I wonder if Venerable Cambrian will agree?" 2 million crystal essences? Venerable Cambrian's brows furrowed and he asked with a puzzled expression, "What do you want his immortal soul for?" "An old friend of mine is refining the 100 Demons Blood Soul Streamer, and happens to lack a main soul," said Venerable Wandering Slayer lightly. "Argent Marshal Hale made me unhappy, so I'm willing to buy his immortal soul to be the main soul of this 100 Demons Blood Soul Streamer." "The 100 Demons Blood Soul Streamer?" Venerable Cambrian's pupils shrunk and horror filled his eyes as he sternly said, "Venerable Wandering Slayer, your old friend dares to refine such a vicious demonic weapon like the 100 Demons Blood Soul Streamer? Isn't he afraid that the powerhouses in the entire immortal world will know about it and endlessly hunt him down?" "That's his business. It has nothing to do with me," said Venerable Wandering Slayer lightly. Venerable Cambrian glanced at Argent Marshal Hale in his hand and saw the fear on his face. He pondered for a few seconds and then slowly said, "Double the price and this dog's immortal soul will be yours." "Venerable Cambrian is straightforward," said Venerable Wandering Slayer with a bright smile. "Then let's write off this matter. Here are 4 million crystal essences. Take them." Venerable Cambrian handed Argent Marshal Hale's immortal soul to Venerable Wandering Slayer and coldly said, "Since this matter has been resolved, can you open this array and let us leave?" "Please." Venerable Wandering Slayer narrowed his eyes and quickly opened the immortal array, watching Venerable Cambrian's group of 3 leave. Then he turned back to look at Tang Xiu and meaningfully said, "It's my Live Plume Mansion's honor to have you graced us with your presence, Great Tang Heavenly Emperor. It's just that the kind of pure and lovely beauty you mentioned is too rare here. Please follow me inside and I'll immediately send someone to find one for you. How about it?" "A guest follows the host." Tan Xiu faintly smiled and followed the 5 people to the back of the palace along with Sablefiend Scorpio. As the array in the palace was opened, Tan Xiu and Sablefiend Scorpio, who had just entered, were immediately surrounded by Venerable Wandering Slayer, Golden Ray Old Freak, and the others. Looking at their discontented and murderous eyes, Tan Xiu lightly smiled and said, "Why do the 5 of you have to make the atmosphere so tense? I just said that we have a bit of a relationship." "What I want to know is the true identity of Great Tang Heavenly Emperor," said Venerable Wandering Slayer indifferently. "What's your relationship with Star Cultivation Great Emperor?" Tan Xiu sighed and shook his head. He walked to a long table and took out a wine cup from his interspatial ring. He picked up a pot of fine wine on the table and poured a cup for himself. Then he gently swirled the wine and slowly said, "Just like you, I once visited Star Cultivation Great Emperor and got some pointers from him. As for my origin, I'm the Lord of Mist Source Island in the Immortal Lyceum domain, as well as the Emperor of the Great Tang Empire." The expressions of the 5 people shifted. "Where's the Great Tang Empire you mentioned?" asked Venerable Wandering Slayer immediately. "I just told you. Mist Source Island," replied Tan Xiu with a faint smile. "You're just talking nonsense, aren't you?" Venerable Wandering Slayer sneered. "Mist Source Island is Apotheosis Bella's territory. How could she allow you to establish an empire in her territory?" "I'm happy to do so. What's it to you?" A hazy figure instantly appeared in the hall. Apotheosis Bella, who had restored her original appearance, came to Tan Xiu's side with a lofty attitude and softly asked, "I received your message and immediately rushed over. Are you all right?" "I'm fine." Tan Xiu shook his head with a smile. Chapter 1348. Venerable Wandering Slayer and Old Freak Golden Ray's group of 5 immediately showed respect when they saw Apotheosis Bella. It wasn't a superficial respect, but a genuine admiration for her from the bottom of their hearts. It was well known that Apotheosis Bella had put down all the reservations of a woman and courageously pursued Star Cultivation Great Emperor before he became a supremacy stage powerhouse. Even if she was rejected many times, she still persisted and persevered. She was courageous and persistent. There were many touching love stories in the immortal world, but none of them was more admirable than Apotheosis Bella. Especially after Star Cultivation Great Emperor failed to cross his tribulation and perished. She went through brutal battles again and again to help Star Cultivation Great Emperor's clan, and wandered on the edge of life and death again and again. It could be said that, if it weren't for Apotheosis Bella's help, the Rosefinch Holy Sect would probably be in a more miserable state. Furthermore, after Apotheosis Bella broke through to the supremacy stage, the Inner Pill Sect and the Everlasting Palace temporarily cancelled their attack, and only trapped the people of the Rosefinch Holy Sect. Greetings, Apotheosis Bella. The 5 men cupped their fists and bowed. I may have broken through to the supremacy stage, but I still like my previous name, said Apotheosis Bella lightly. You can continue to call me Apotheosis Bella from now on. Understood. The 5 respectfully replied. Apotheosis Bella shifted to Tan Xiao and asked, Did something happy happen to you? You look very happy, no? Tan Xiao let out a faint smile, and took out 4 million crystal essences from his interspatial ring. He handed it to Venerable Wandering Slayer and smilingly said, Thank you for helping me just now, Venerable Wandering Slayer. These are the crystal essences you've spent. Please give me Argent Martial Hale's immortal soul, Venerable Wandering Slayer. Venerable Wandering Slayer had just put Argent Martial Hale's immortal soul into a soul fusion vessel. Upon hearing Tan Xiao's words, he directly took out the soul fusion vessel and handed it to Tan Xiao with a smile. It's just 4 million crystal essences. It's nothing to me. We brothers also hate that traitor, Argent Martial Hale. If the Great Tang Heavenly Emperor is doing this for the sake of Star Cultivation Great Emperor, then forget about this crystal essence. Tan Xiao insisted on giving the crystal essence to Venerable Wandering Slayer and seriously said, That's a different matter. I'm already very grateful for your help, so I still have to give you this crystal essence. This. Wandering Slayer Venerable turned to look at Apotheosis Bella. Apotheosis Bella lightly smiled and said, Just take it since I gave it to you. We don't like to owe people too much. Saying, she reached out to hold Tan Xiao's arm, and the smile on her face deepened. You, Venerable Wandering Slayer's pupils shrunk, and disbelief filled his eyes. The other 4 also had the same reaction as him, as if they had seen the most incredible thing in the world. Great Tang Heavenly Emperor is my enemy. He's the enemy who robbed my immortal Lyceum, said Apotheosis Bella lightly. Do you all remember it? Venerable Wandering Slayer's group of 5 exchanged glances, and immediately turned pale. After a moment of silence, the 5 of them immediately took an immortal oath. Immediately after, Venerable Wandering Slayer seriously said, I guarantee that the entire immortal world will know that Great Tang Heavenly Emperor and Apotheosis Bella have a blood feud in a month at most. If any of you come to my Great Tang Empire one day, I'll explain to you in detail the insights I gained from breaking through to the supremacy stage, said Apotheosis Bella with satisfaction. Thank you. The 5 of them looked pleasantly surprised. Tan Xiao let out a faint smile and said, Gentlemen, since we're fated to meet today, why don't we drink until we're drunk? Venerable Wandering Slayer laughed aloud and said, Since Great Tang Heavenly Emperor doesn't mind my place, then let's drink to our heart's content. Men, go get my green bamboo immortal wine. We're not leaving until we're drunk with Great Tang Heavenly Emperor. For 2 whole days, Tan Xiao and the 5 drank to their heart's content while chatting about the immortal world. Apotheosis Bella and Sablefiend Scorpio just stayed at the side to accompany them, and didn't interfere with Tan Xiao and the 5 perfected Golden Immortals drinking and chatting. Finally, after Golden Ray Old Freak was the first to get drunk, the other 5, including Tan Xiao, also got drunk. 7 days later, when Tan Xiao woke up from his sleep, he found himself leaning on Apotheosis Bella's bosom as they hurried along in a carriage. The whole sky was covered in red clouds, and the enchanting world looked particularly beautiful. How long did I sleep? Where are we now? Tan Xiao rubbed his aching head and asked after sitting up straight. It's been 7 days. We're only 3 immortal domains away from the immortal Lyceum, said Apotheosis Bella with a faint smile. We'll be back home in a few days at most. So fast. Tan Xiu was surprised. Sable Fiend Scorpio got a treasure robe from the drunken Immortal Palace in the secret palace, and gave it to me. That's why we're a bit faster. What treasure robe is that? Asked Tan Xiu, puzzled. It's the luminous wings, answered Apotheosis Bella with a smile. Tan Xiu looked surprised and said, Rumor has it that the luminous wings were obtained by drunken Immortal Supreme, and disappeared after he ascended to the god's realm. I didn't expect that Sable Fiend Scorpio would get it. Not bad at all. This is a treasure, and whoever is able to obtain it will at least be able to increase their speed explosively by nearly a fold. Regardless of whether it's for traveling or fighting, it's definitely a great weapon. I'll give you the luminous wings when we return to the Immortal Lyceum, said Apotheosis Bella with a smile. Tan Xiu shook his head and said, The luminous wings can play a greater role if it's on you. If our great Tang Empire wants to develop and occupy a large immortal domain at an extremely fast speed, we need a powerhouse like you to oversee it. The Great Tang Empire must complete the first phase of development within 100 years and thoroughly lay a solid foundation. 100 years later, our Great Tang Empire will completely erupt. Isn't 100 years too hasty? Asked Apotheosis Bella hesitantly. It's not that urgent. Tan Xiu chuckled. If we can't lay a solid foundation after investing a lot of cultivation resources, then the Great Tang Empire's people are really incompetent. You must know that the wealth and various cultivation resources I've prepared are definitely many times more than those of other forces. The most important heritage of a superpower is the number of golden immortals and perfected golden immortals, said Apotheosis Bella. Do you think the Great Tang Empire can produce a large number of golden immortals and perfected golden immortals within 100 years? The Great Tang Empire has more than a dozen perfected golden immortals so far, said Tan Xiu calmly. As for the number of golden immortals, there will be at least tens of thousands of them within 100 years. What? Apotheosis Bella's eyes were filled with disbelief. It must be noted that even the largest force at present had no more than 10,000 golden immortals, perhaps less than 5,000. What kind of heritage does the Great Tang Empire have to be able to produce tens of thousands of golden immortals within 100 years? Bella, you still don't know much about the current situation of the Great Tang Empire. Tan Xiu chuckled and said, You'll understand a lot of things after we go back. What I can tell you now is that the depth of the foundation of these 30 to 40,000 monster immortals is terrifying. Let alone the golden immortal stage. If they are given enough time and good guidance in cultivation, it won't be a problem for most of them to break through to the perfected golden immortal stage in the future. Gasp. Apotheosis Bella couldn't imagine where Tan Xiu could find so many monster immortals. But the thought of the emergence of tens of thousands of perfected golden immortals in the Great Tang Empire made her scalp tingle. At that time, wouldn't they be able to sweep the immortal world with just this force alone? Stop first, Bella, said Tan Xiu suddenly. Apotheosis Bella stared blankly and looked around a few times. After stopping, she asked in confusion, Why? We saved Dao Master Qing Feng and undemonized Sovereign Mo on the way back, said Tan Xiu. They are now in the heavenly abode artifact that I carry with me. Chapter 1349. A smile appeared on the corner of Tan Xiu's mouth as he lightly said, You really don't want to be her maid? Think about it clearly. You only have one chance. Jing Xian carefully observed Apotheosis Bella. Although she was attracted by the peerless beauty in front of her, she didn't want to be someone else's maid. She shook her head and said, I'll choose my own path. I just want to worship a master and become stronger. I don't want to be someone else's maid. That's really a pity. Tan Xiu shook his head and sighed. A dignified supremacy in the immortal world can't even get a maid. Just follow Sable Fiend Scorpio and cultivate from now on. I hope you can become a powerhouse as you wish in the future. What did you say? Jing Xian. Er's complexion greatly changed and disbelief filled her eyes as she exclaimed, Supremacy? How could this be possible? There were only a few supremacy powerhouses in the entire immortal world. How could she easily encounter one here? Sable Fiend Scorpio also looked regretful and sighed. Master is right, Jingxian. Apotheosis Bella may still be using this name, but she's a supremacy stage powerhouse. There are probably countless people in the entire immortal world who want to become a supremacy's maid. It's even possible that golden immortals and perfected golden immortals are willing to be a maid. You miss such a God-given opportunity. It seems you can only follow me and cultivate supremacy. Endless regret rose inside Jingxian. She never dreamed that she would do such a stupid thing in this life. It must be noted that even some perfected golden immortals wanted to follow a supremacy, hoping to get their guidance so that they would have a better chance of breaking through to the supremacy stage in the future. But herself, she was just a nobody at the celestial immortal stage. She was still a profound immortal and golden immortal away from the perfected golden immortal stage. Yet, she directly refused a supremacy stage powerhouse without figuring out the other party's identity. She really wanted to cry but had no tears. Apotheosis Bella just glanced at Jingxian, and no longer cared about such a trivial matter. Although Jingxian was extremely beautiful, and there weren't many women with such beauty in the entire immortal world, Apotheosis Bella wasn't worried that something would happen between her and Tan Xiao. Firstly, she didn't care whether it happened or not. Secondly, with Tan Xiao's personality, even if the other party's beauty was enough to cause the downfall of a country, he wouldn't fall in love so easily. Time flew by. When Tan Xiao and Apotheosis Bella returned to the Immortal Lyceum domain, they found that the Great Tang Empire's army was still tens of millions of kilometers away from the Misty Spring Ocean. A team of 100 people was searching for something in a dense mountain forest. They looked as if they were about to face a formidable enemy. Let's go take a look. Tan Xiao's expression shifted, and he immediately flew toward the 100-man squad. His figure blocked in front of them, and looked at their vigilant expressions as if they were facing a formidable enemy. Then he indifferently said, "It's me. What happened here? You seem to be very vigilant." "Greetings, Your Majesty." The captain of the 100-man squad immediately knelt on one knee and saluted Tan Xiao with all his members. "Our Great Tang Empire's army has been spreading out in all directions with the Misty Spring Ocean as the center. The Immortal Lyceum's people will have some friction with us every time they pass through a certain place. Then they will be defeated and become our captives. But a few days ago, our squad encountered an unprecedented resistance. The enemy's leader is someone from the Immortal Lyceum, but our commander suspects that he's not really from the Immortal Lyceum, but an undercover agent from some other forces." Tan Xiao raised his brows and asked, "How many people do they have? What's the cultivation level of their leader?" 24 people, and their leader is a celestial immortal." Tan Xiao turned to look at Sable Fiend Scorpio and lightly said, "You stay here to deal with this matter. Keep in mind that if they really don't want to surrender, expel them and don't kill them." "Understood." Sable Fiend Scorpio nodded respectfully. Tan Xiao and Apotheosis Bella then flew away, and even left Jingxian to Sable Fiend Scorpio. Due to Apotheosis Bella's cultivation and the flowing light wings she obtained, her speed was simply heaven-defying. She took Tan Xiao back to Misty Spring Island in just a quarter of an hour. Myriad Golden Sail. After Tan Xiao returned, he directly placed the Myriad Golden Sail on the top of a towering mountain. It was shrouded in clouds and mist, and the entire Myriad Golden Sail was faintly discernible and looked magnificent. Tan Xiao regarded this place as the Great Tang Empire's council hall, as well as the place where he usually resided. On the first floor, Tan Xiao sat on the temporary dragon throne and glanced at the faces of the nearly 100 high-ranking members of the Great Tang Empire. Then he said with satisfaction, "I've gained a lot from this trip. The first thing I need to announce is that from today onward, all members of the Great Tang Empire, from the elders to the soldiers, will receive double the basic treatment." "Thank you, Your Majesty." Everyone present smiled. Most of them had followed Tang Xiao here from Earth, so they were all too clear about the amount of cultivation resources and the impact it had on their cultivation. If they could get more cultivation resources, their cultivation speed would increase a lot. It was definitely a happy thing. On the contrary, the perfected golden immortals like Zenith Venerable, Seaway Monarch, Fiery Demon Lion, Golden-Eyed Great Pung, Limitless Demonic Wolf, Nether Sea Whale King, Apotheon Mu, Apotheon Myriad Notes, Apotheon Soaring Plum, 9 Immortal Fingers, and Apotheon Enchantress, you were secretly startled. Although the current Great Tang Empire was not very powerful, it had a large number of people, and the resources it needed to consume every year was probably a huge number. Moreover, all of them were Golden Immortal Realm experts, so the amount of resources they received was already extremely huge. So if they doubled it, then the consumption would probably be enormous. Grandmaster Gu Xiaoxue called out with a worried look on her face. Tan Xiu waved his hand and said, I understand your concern, Xiaoxue. Don't worry. We obtained a lot of immortal treasures, immortal crystals, and crystal essences during the mission to the secret palace. The resources are much more than the total wealth of our Great Tang Empire. So you don't have to worry at all. Besides, the entire immortal world is too huge, and the number of resources is innumerable. Even if we consume all our wealth, we can still get more from other places. After saying that, he took out an interspatial ring and handed it to Gu Xiaoxue, saying, You are in charge of the treasury resources. As the Minister of Finance of our Great Tang Empire, you are in charge of the allocation of resources. Soon after, Tan Xiu took a deep breath and lightly said, I now announce that the Great Tang Empire will establish the Ministry of Justice. The Minister of Justice will be Apotheon Mu, while Tang Ning and Cheng Xuemei will be the deputy ministers to assist Apotheon Mu in managing the Ministry of Justice. The members of the Ministry of Justice will be selected by yourselves, and I will review the list of all the members of the Ministry of Justice later. In addition, the three of you will discuss with the Ministry of Finance to formulate a reward and punishment system. Also, after Tan Xiu announced the orders, he ordered everyone to leave. Then, he went to the place where his parents lived, which was a sea of flowers. A beautiful villa was located in the middle of the sea of flowers. This villa was not an ordinary building, but an immortal artifact personally refined by Gu Yan. At this moment, Su Lingyun accompanied her mother, Zhang Shi. She was reading a thick book while chatting with Zhang Shi. Not far from the two of them, Gu Yin was sitting cross-legged, allowing the multicolored butterflies and immortal bees to surround her as she cultivated silently. A faintly discernible aura surged from her body. As soon as Tan Xiu arrived, he judged that Gu Yan's cultivation had reached the crossing tribulation stage. Time flies so fast. Gu Yin, this little girl, has grown up. Tan Xiu's eyes swept over Gu Yin's beautiful face and secretly sighed. Then he strode to Su Lingyun and Zhang Shi and called out with a smile. Mom, Grandma, are you busy? Xiu. Zhang Shi and Su Lingyun were pleasantly surprised to see Tan Xiu. Ever since they came to the immortal world with Tan Xiu often left for a year and a half. This time, it was even longer, so the two of them missed Tan Xiu very much. Master. Gu Yin, who was cultivating in the flowers, immediately stopped cultivating when she heard the voice and rushed over with a joyful laughter. Tan Xiu smiled and patted Gu Yin's shoulder, who was holding his arm intimately. He said with a smile, Time flies so fast. Little Yinin has grown into a big girl. Come, Master will give you a treasure. Gu Yin's eyes lit up and asked curiously, What treasure? Tan Xiu took out the 5-colored Dragon Ball and handed it to Gu Yin. He smiled and said, Absorb it into your body and slowly refine it. This is the Dragon Ball of a 5-colored divine dragon. It will be of great help to your cultivation. It's so beautiful. Gu Yin looked pleasantly surprised and kept fiddling with it in her hand. Tan Xiu faintly smiled. He had obtained a total of 12 5-colored Dragon Balls. He gave one to Star Tears and one to Gu Yin, so there were still 10 left in his interspatial ring. Immediately after, he took out 2 more and quickly cast a seal to insert them into his mother, Su Lingyun, and grandmother, Zhang Shi. He then said with a smile, Grandma, Mom, both of you stepped into cultivation too late, and your cultivation is too weak. Hence, having the 5-colored Dragon Ball in your bodies can change your physique and speed up your cultivation speed. Hence, you must cultivate well. I'm looking forward to the day you break through to the immortal stage. Su Lingyun smiled and said, Xiao, your grandmother, and I don't care whether you can become an immortal or not. You know what we care about the most. It's been so many years, when can you? Tan Xiao hurriedly interrupted her, and let out a dry smile. Don't worry, Mom. Give me some time, and you'll definitely have a lot of grandchildren in the future. You brat, Su Lingyun said with some dissatisfaction. How can we not be anxious? Avu. Tan Xiao stared blankly. His mother had already stepped into cultivation, and had broken through to the golden core stage with the help of a lot of resources. Yet she actually felt disgusted? That shouldn't be the case, right? Chapter 1350. Cultivators at the golden core stage were well aware of their own condition, and it was nearly impossible for them to fall sick. Unless there was a root cause of the disease or an injury that hadn't been completely healed, only then would it relapse at some special time. But his mother shouldn't have any problems living in such an environment, right? In a flash, Tan Xiao crouched down beside Su Lingyun and grabbed her wrist. In just half a minute, Tan Xiao's expression became particularly interesting. What's going on? Tan Xiao blinked and slowly raised his head to look at his mother with a strange expression. Being stared at by Tan Xiao, Su Lingyun felt a chill run down her spine and asked in confusion. Why are you looking at me like that, Xiao? Are you checking my pulse? Is there something wrong with my body? Tan Xiao's lips squirmed a few times before he immediately released his mother's wrist. He turned around and retreated a dozen steps back, and then burst into laughter. Don't force me to have a child anymore, Mom. I'm afraid you won't have time to take care of me even if I have a child now. Because Su Lingyun furrowed her brows and angrily said, What nonsense are you talking about, kid? You're my grandson. Why won't I have time to take care of him? Tan Xiao raised his hand to interrupt her, and reappeared at Su Lingyun's side. He then leaned close to her ear and grinningly said, I'm going to be a big brother, Mom. What? Su Lingyun stared blankly. When she came to her senses, she abruptly got up from the chair with disbelief on her beautiful face. There was even more shame and anger on her face as she angrily said, What the hell are you talking about, kid? How could I possibly? I'm telling the truth, Mom, said Tan Xiao seriously with a smile. So what you need to do next is to protect the fetus, give birth to a child, and let me be a big brother. Ha ha ha. Sitting at the side, Zhang Shi also wore a strange expression and murmured, Xiao, you mean your mother is pregnant? Yes. It's been 3 months. Tan Xiao nodded affirmatively. In a flash, Su Lingyun stood rooted to the ground. She was even in a state of panic. She was already a mother-in-law and had more than a dozen daughters-in-law. But none of her daughters-in-law were pregnant, and she was a mother-in-law. Wouldn't it be shameful if this was known by others? Tang Xiao instantly released his spiritual sense and quickly found Mu Weining, who was cultivating in his residence, and sent her a voice transmission. A few minutes later, Mu Weining appeared in front of the villa. Congratulations, Mother. Mu Weining couldn't help but smile as she approached Su Lingyun and said, Mother. Su Lingyun was in a complete mess. She never thought that Mu Weining would find out in just a few minutes. She didn't even have time to ask her son to keep the secret for her. At this moment, Su Lingyun wanted to find a hole to hide in. She didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Tan Xiao has just arranged things for me. Don't worry. I'll take good care of you. No need. Su Lingyun was embarrassed. She really wanted to strangle her son who was so quick to speak. Tan Xiao chuckled. After noticing his mother's embarrassment, he immediately said, Grandma, I still have something to do, so I won't stay here. I'll tell Xiaoxue to deliver whatever Mother needs. That ha ha ha. I still have something to do, so I'll take my leave first. After saying that, he then disappeared without a trace. Half a day later, Tan Xiao found his father, who was wiping his wound, in the military camp thousands of kilometers southeast of Mist Source Island. He handed a purple scent pill to his father and smilingly said, Dad, there's something I need you to do. Mom is waiting for you at home. Tang Yunda took the fragrant purple scent pill and directly swallowed it, asking, What's the matter? I'm not free now. A smile outlined on the corner of Tan Xiao's mouth as he smilingly said, Actually, it's not a big deal. It's just that you're going to be a father again. If you don't have time, then I'll go back and tell Mom. Becoming a father? Again? Tang Yunda was stunned. His eyes instantly turned round as disbelief burst out from his eyes. He involuntarily exclaimed, "Your mother is pregnant?" "Yes, she is." Tan Xiao nodded with a smile. Tang Yimpeng was overjoyed and instantly soared into the sky. He laughed and shouted, "I'll leave this place to you, Tang Wei. Your second uncle has something important to do, so lead the troops for me." Whoosh! A figure flickered lightning fast and quickly appeared in front of Tan Xiao. Tang Wei's face was full of bewilderment as he looked at Tang Yimpeng's rapidly flying figure, and asked in bewilderment, "What happened? Second uncle?" "It's nothing. It's just that you're going to be a big brother soon." Tan Xiao grinned. Tang Wei rolled his eyes and snappily scolded, "I'm already a big brother, okay?" Tan Xiao smiled and patted his shoulder. He then stuffed an interspatial ring into his hand, and then soared into the sky. Only a few words echoed in Tang Wei's ears. "Hurry up and cultivate. You must break through to the immortal stage within 100 years. Our great Tang Empire will be fighting against powerful enemies in 1,000 years at most. If you haven't broken through to the golden immortal stage by then, your chances of survival won't be very high." In just a few days, the news of Su Lingyun's pregnancy spread throughout Miss Source Island. All the high-level officials of the Great Tang Empire were at a loss whether to laugh or cry. Finally, their eyes fell on Tan Xiao's myriad Jinfan Hall. This was because everyone knew that Heavenly Emperor Tan Xiao had yet to have an heir, so they didn't expect that his mother would be pregnant again. "Work hard, Your Majesty. You can do it." Everywhere Tan Xiao went, he heard such words or encouraging eyes. At first, Tan Xiao was very happy and thought that it was a joyous occasion. But later he really couldn't stand the nagging and strange eyes of others, so he directly issued some orders and hid in the myriad Jinfan to cultivate in seclusion. However, even if he hid in the myriad Jinfan to cultivate, he still couldn't get any peace. His harem concubines came here every few days. They simply had a tacit understanding and coaxed and pestered Tan Xiao to their residence. Their intention was very obvious. They wanted children. In the end, whether it was Kong Xia, Mu Weining, or Andy, Tangan, Gongwaner, Viviani, Kawako Yamamoto, and the other women who he had never touched before, all of them finally became his real women. Dual cultivation was also a kind of cultivation. Therefore, both Tan Xiao's and the women's cultivation began to advance by leaps and bounds, especially the women. It was especially so for the women. Due to Tang Xiao's special physique and the primal chaos force he cultivated, their cultivation speed was simply godly, and their cultivation rapidly skyrocketed. A few months later, Tan Xiao left the misty spring ocean alone, and came to the southernmost barren land of the Immortal Lyceum. This was a rocky area. Except for a small group of vicious cultivators, no one else set foot here. Blackwind Stronghold. This was a territory established by nearly 100 martial cultivators. They often went out to rob and plunder to provide for their cultivation. This group was ruthless and merciless. Those who were robbed by them always had only one end, death. Tan Xiao learned of the existence of this group through the Shadow Division. Kill. The strongest among them was a cultivator at the spirit transformation stage. However, in Tan Xiao's eyes, they were simply ant-like existences. He didn't even use his natal divine sword, and just casually used an immortal sword to kill all these bandits. Soon after, Tan Xiao used their souls and blood to arrange a soul-extinguishing array here. The moment the soul-extinguishing array was successfully arranged, a fierce look flashed in his eyes. He immediately took out a soul fusion vessel and released Argent Marshal Hale's immortal soul. "Please spare my life, exalted immortal." After Argent Marshal Hale's immortal soul was released, he immediately knelt toward Tan Xiao, trembling and begging for mercy. It could be said that this was the first time he was so scared since he was born. He knew very well that once his immortal soul was extinguished, his soul would scatter, and he wouldn't even have the chance to reincarnate. Tan Xiao took a deep breath and coldly said, "Do you want to live? Live like a dog." Argent Marshal Hale looked up at Tan Xiao and was slightly startled. He had seen Tan Xiao before and knew that Tan Xiao was just a bystander when he appeared in the live plume mansion. How come it's you? Why can't it be me? Tan Xiao indifferently said. The Everlasting Palace sold your cheap life to Venerable Wandering Slayer for 4 million crystal essences, and I bought it from him for 4 million crystal essences. Argent Marshal Hale's fearful heart immediately relaxed after hearing this. He believed that since the other party was willing to spend 4 million crystal essences to buy him, he wouldn't be easily exterminated. However, the fact that he was sold by the Everlasting Palace for only 4 million crystal essences made him furious. Senior, since you bought me, I'm already your man. As long as you don't kill me, I'm willing to be your dog. Argent Marshal Hale squeezed out a flattering smile and said. Tan Xiao narrowed his eyes and lightly said, You need the ability to be my dog. Come, bark twice and let me hear it. Woof woof. Argent Marshal Hale endured the humiliation. Despite his resentment toward Tan Xiao, he still smiled obsequiously and barked a few times like a dog. Boom! Tan Xiao punched lightning fast and fiercely bombarded Argent Marshal Hale's chest. A strong killing intent was released from his body as he watched Argent Marshal Hale fly away. He then dashed to the front of him in an instant, and stomped on Argent Marshal Hale's chest. Seeing that his immortal soul was faintly on the verge of breaking, he coldly said, Argent Marshal Hale, does your former master know that you're such a despicable bastard? Argent Marshal Hale was in great pain, but for the sake of his own life he screamed, He doesn't know. He'll never know. Because he's dead. He died before I could truly grow up. After saying that, a crazy hatred was revealed in his tone. Tan Xiao was stunned. He looked at Argent Marshal Hale in disbelief and incredulously said, You mean you hate your master very much? Just because he died before you could grow up? He can't protect you anymore? You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.